Chapter 986. The mountain spring flowed down the waterfall. Under the impact of the water, the four words World Commerce Association were still majestic and showed the vitality of the World Commerce Association. The creator of these four words was standing on top of the waterfall with his hands behind his back, enjoying the bright sunlight and breathing in the free air. The waterfall flows down 3,000 feet, like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Good poem, good poem. The poetic Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but praise himself. He glanced at the four people staring at him from the sky. From their clothes, they were still disciples of Heartless Palace. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart. With the power of Heartless Palace, it was impossible that they hadn't received the news. This Qin Yun Xan was probably still verifying the credibility of the news. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to send people to watch him after he knew that he was working for the Immortal Emperor, F***CKU. Who's afraid of who? I'm the Imperial Envoy now. A stream of light shot out from the waterfall and flew directly towards the central plaza of Hallucination Immortal City. The sea of clouds was vast and mighty, tens of thousands of mountains stood in the middle, and all kinds of streams of light rose and fell, showing the extraordinariness of the most prosperous place in the immortal world. The plaza was bustling, no different from a market in the human world. The human world sold the daily necessities of mortals, while the immortal world sold the daily necessities of immortals. The only difference was that they were on a different level. The extravagant desire of the human heart, whether it was an immortal or a mortal, all roads led to the same destination. There were countless stalls on the plaza, selling all kinds of things that could be sold. However, the items that were set up here were usually not of a high grade. The truly valuable items were all in the grand buildings at the top of the mountains, but the liveliness of the plaza was far greater than the mountains. It could be seen that whether it was the immortal world or the mortal world, the poor would always be the majority. Those disciples wearing the clothing of the large sects shuttled through the crowd and occasionally stopped at a stall. Regardless of their cultivation, they revealed a condescending aura as they asked the stall owner for the price. Meanwhile, those stall owners bowed and fawned over them, not daring to offend them. Even though they were being careful, most of the time, they were met with extremely belittling and disdainful tones from the customers. Even if the customers were to do them the honor of buying 1 or 2 items, don't even think about how generous these customers would be. It was already good enough if they didn't suppress the price. Yu Qianqiu paced back and forth in the vast sea of people. He smiled and looked at the world with his cold eyes. Occasionally, he would raise his head to look at the 4 disciples of Heartless Palace who were protecting him. Even though he'd stayed in the illusory immortal city for a long time, he'd rarely come to this place. He'd only come here once or twice before the World Trading Company was established. Now that he'd relaxed, he finally had the leisure to come out and take a stroll. People who set up stalls in such places were considered to be the lowest rung in the immortal world. Not many people had seen Yu Qianqiu before. Even if they had seen him once or twice, with how he, Yu Qianqiu, dressed in an unusually low-key manner, who would have seen a sect master with a storage pouch on his waist? In addition to his ordinary appearance, there was nothing special about him when he was thrown into a crowd. If they weren't familiar with him and didn't look at him face to face, they probably wouldn't be able to recognize that he was the sect master of the World Trading Company, Yu Qianqiu. Most people's gazes only flashed past his face and didn't linger. Because of this, his mood became more relaxed as he strolled. In reality, he quite liked to stroll around aimlessly like this. There was no restraint of entering a room, no effort of scheming. Looking at the hundreds of people, they saw him as nothing more than an ordinary idler. Along the way, he could hear many people talking about him. They were all talking about the matters that the Immortal Emperor had personally decreed for him to do. Yu Qianqiu ignored them and strolled with a faint smile on his lips. As he walked, he was suddenly attracted by a refreshing fragrance. He took a deep breath and felt his spirits lift. He looked around and didn't know where the fragrance was coming from. This kind of fragrance was very attractive to him. He wondered who was selling fragrant things. It wouldn't be a bad idea to buy some and put it in his room. He cupped his hands and asked a man who was walking towards him, "May I ask this friend, where can I find something with this kind of strange fragrance?" He pointed around and then at his own nose. The man was startled. He took a few more deep breaths, but he didn't smell any fragrance. Instead, he smelled the body odors of all kinds of people passing by. He frowned and said, "Where is this fragrance coming from?" He waved his sleeves and left, treating him as a lunatic. Yu Qianqiu was startled. He couldn't smell such a special fragrance. There must be something wrong with his nose. He then asked a few passers-by, but the answers he got were more or less the same. No one smelled any fragrance. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but be startled in the crowd. He touched his nose and asked himself, could it be that there was something wrong with his nose? But he felt that it wasn't right. If there was something wrong with his nose, he shouldn't be able to smell anything. If that was the case, his nose was unusually sensitive. I'll find it myself. Yu Qianqiu took 2 deep breaths. Then, like a hunting dog, he sniffed the air with his nose and moved around the crowd, following the fragrance. The area of the square was not small, so he spent a lot of time looking for it. The 4 heartless palace disciples in the air looked at each other. They didn't know why he was wandering around like a headless fly. At the edge of the square, the crowd gradually thinned. Yu Qianqiu swayed out from the crowd and sniffed in front of him. He was stunned. Below the cliff in front of him was an old tree with a crooked neck. Its old roots were deeply rooted in the crevices of the cliff, its lush green leaves extended out like a giant parasol. A white sail was hanging from the branches, swaying in the wind. Huang Xiaolong couldn't see what was written on it. Under the shade of the tree, there were 2 tables and stools. A slightly hunched old man with white hair and a little girl around 13 or 14 years old were serving bowls of food to the customers. There weren't many customers. One of the tables was empty, while the other only had a single customer. Yu Qianqiu's nose twitched again, sniffing again. After confirming that the fragrance came from that stall, he was speechless. He thought it was selling something, but it was actually food. Shaking his head, Huang Xiaolong slowly walked over. When he reached the bottom of the tree, he saw the words written on the white sail, "Green clear, 1 divine grade spirit stone per bowl." What kind of thing was green clear, selling a bowl for 1 divine grade spirit stone? Yu Qianqiu turned back to look at the square. There weren't many people who could sell something for 1 divine grade spirit stone, not to mention a bowl of food. No wonder business was so bad. Honored guest. Would you like to have a bowl of green clear? An old man in hemp robes walked over, greeting enthusiastically. The old man's face was sagging, his eyes were cloudy, and with a head full of white hair and a slightly hunched back, one look was enough to tell that he was not young. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head, a wry smile on his face. "Old man, it's not that I want to criticize you, but the things you sell here are really expensive. Forget it. I came here after smelling your aroma, it can be considered fate. Just take it as taking care of your business. I'd like to try something new. Give me a bowl." Hee hee. Honored guest, please wait a moment. The hunchbacked old man hurried to his counter. Yu Qianqiu sat on another empty seat, looking at the bustling crowd in front of him. The shade under the tree had a different kind of flavor to it. A short while later, the budding young lady in green robes came over with a yellow wooden bowl, her voice crisp and clear. "Honored guest, please enjoy." Inside the bowl was a wooden ladle soup of the same color, and inside the bowl was a lush green jelly that was pleasing to the eye. A refreshing fragrance assaulted his nostrils. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was the same fragrance he had smelled earlier. He hoped this fragrance was worth a divine grade spirit stone. Picking up the ladle soup, He scooped up a spoonful of lush green jelly, but when it reached his mouth, he couldn't help exclaiming in surprise. He sniffed twice with his nose and discovered that the refreshing fragrance did not come from this bowl of green clear, but he tilted his head and sniffed at the green-robed young lady who had just turned to leave. He couldn't resist putting down the bowl and sniffing behind the young lady's butt. Smelling like a pig snoring, how could the green-robed young lady not notice? Startled, she spun around, but seeing Huang Xiaolong's lecherous appearance, she retreated in panic. "What are you trying to do?" "Grandfather." She was completely treating him like a pervert, guarding against him. Yu Qianqiu blanked for a second, looking at this young lady's delicate features and fair skin. It was obvious she was a beauty in the making. When she grew up, she would definitely be a beauty. Huang Xiaolong waved his hand awkwardly. Don't misunderstand. No matter how much of a pervert he was, he had not fallen to the point of laying his hands on a young lady. The slightly hunchbacked old man also put down the work in his hands, blocking in front of the green-robed young lady, asking solemnly, "Honored guest, why are you doing this?" The customers at the other table snickered, winking at Yu Qianqiu as if they were kindred spirits. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with him. He cupped his hands at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. "I'm really ashamed, please don't misunderstand. It was because I smelled a sweet fragrance, that's why I followed it here. I thought it was the fragrance from the bowl, but when I picked up the bowl just now, I realized that the fragrance came from this young lady, so I couldn't help but sniff a few times. My apologies for being abrupt, please don't misunderstand." After saying that, he obediently returned to his seat. The hunchbacked old man's eyes suddenly flashed with a bright light. He sized up Yu Qianqiu with a meaningful gaze, then turned to the green-robed young lady and chuckled. Don't be nervous, it's just a misunderstanding." The customer at the other table suddenly picked up his bowl and sat next to Yu Qianqiu, smiling as he transmitted his voice. "Brother really has a good eye. The excuse of smelling a beauty is not bad, but there's a first come, first served rule for everything. I saw this little beauty first. I'm Wangu Tong's disciple, my apologies." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the person's robe, but didn't say anything. He scooped up a spoonful of the green liquid and put it into his mouth. As a result, it melted in his mouth, turning into a refreshing liquid that flowed into his stomach. At the same time, his mouth was filled with a natural sweetness that lingered in the aftertaste. The taste was indeed not bad. He picked up a few spoonfuls of the green liquid and slowly savored the aftertaste. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was ignoring him, the person at the side was about to flare up, but he noticed that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, so he swallowed his anger and slapped the table. "Bill." The green-robed young lady ran over, clasping her hands excitedly. Her sweet voice sounded, "1 piece of divine-grade spirit stone." It was as if she had never seen money before. Chapter 987. Yu Qianqiu agreed with Huang Xiaolong's reasoning. Although the taste of this green clear wasn't bad, a simple stall selling food for a piece of divine-grade spirit stone was indeed a little too expensive. Most likely, no one would patronize this stall. Thus, it was understandable that this little girl was excited when she heard that he was going to pay. What? A bowl of food like this is worth a piece of divine-grade spirit stone. That person's eyebrows rose as he slammed the table, barking, "Aren't you trying to scam me? I'm Wangu Tong's disciple, how dare you scam me, are you tired of living?" Watching the bowl in front of him bouncing from the slap, Yu Qianqiu shot a cold glance over. He wanted to see what kind of method this guy was going to use to get his hands on this lass. The lass in green looked at her grandfather behind her in a fluster, not knowing how to deal with this situation. The hunchbacked old man quickly walked over, pointing at the white sail hanging on the tree with a smile. "Honored customer, this is a business with a clear price. I would not dare to scam people." "Not dare to scam people? Does that mean you're scamming people on purpose?" That person sneered. "Old thing, you really have guts, daring to scam our Wangu Tong." The hunchbacked old man frowned, then sighed. Forget it. it can be considered fate that an honored customer could visit my stall. This bowl of green clear is a free gift. Honored customer, please go ahead, Lou. It was obvious that he didn't want to cause trouble. The lass called Lou pouted, feeling wronged. Her hand reached out to collect the bowl and spoon on the table, but who knew that her hand would be caught by that person? Little girl, you don't look too happy. Are you giving me a hard time? That person's hands rubbed the pair of soft hands with a lascivious smile on his face. The lass in green panicked, crying out, "Grandfather!" She didn't know what to do. Damn it! Disappointing. Yu Qianqiu didn't expect to run into such a situation when he went out to eat. This world was really ruled by evil people. Without a second thought, a kick flew out from under the table, landing on that person's foot. The person lost his balance and fell onto the table. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything else, and with a "fu," he punched him in the face. Bang! That person was sent flying several meters away. Blood spurted out from his mouth and nose in the air. The sudden turn of events scared the little girl so much that she shrank into the arms of the hunchbacked old man. She looked at the customer who committed the crime. He was sitting there quietly, eating the green clear in his bowl as if nothing had happened. The hunchbacked old man patted the little girl in his arms and said, "It's okay, it's okay." He looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head. The commotion immediately attracted the attention of the people on the square. Seeing that someone actually dared to beat someone up in the hallucinatory immortal city, especially when they saw that the person who was beaten up was Wang Gutong's disciple, a commotion broke out. The 4 disciples of the Heartless Palace who were watching him looked at each other. The person who was knocked unconscious shook his head and quickly got up. He wiped the blood from his nose and mouth. He didn't expect to be beaten up in the hallucinatory immortal city. He pointed at Yu Qianqiu and roared, "Who are you? How dare you attack me, Wang Gutong?" He really wanted to rush up and take revenge, but he didn't have the guts to break the hallucinatory immortal city's rules. You alone can't represent Wang Gutong. Since you ate someone else's food, you should pay up honestly, don't embarrass Wang Gutong. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at the person. In reality, he was also restricted by the hallucinatory immortal city's rules, otherwise he would have taken the person's life on the spot. Don't count on this kind of person to turn over a new leaf. Leaving him alive would be a disaster, so killing him was the best solution. However, with this tilt of his head, under everyone's watchful eyes, many people recognized him and whispered to each other, "So it's Yu Qianqiu." As the words Yu Qianqiu spread, the disciple who was beaten stiffened. Even though he had never seen Yu Qianqiu before, he knew that Yu Qianqiu had close ties with many of Wang Gutong's higher-ups. Especially Elder Wang Gutong, who was in charge of this place. He called Yu Qianqiu brother. Even Wan Bushing's precious granddaughter, Wan Ling, had frequent dealings with Yu Qianqiu. The two of them had even held hands in the godly ruins realm. This was something that many people had seen with their own eyes. This guy took a beating for nothing. Many people in the crowd laughed out loud. That Wang Gutong disciple rubbed the place where he was beaten, his eyes filled with resentment as he glared at Yu Qianqiu, but he dared not utter a word, turning around to leave with his tail between his legs. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would harumph coldly, "Leave the money for the food to the boss before you leave. Don't tell me your Wang Gutong has the habit of eating and dashing." The resentment in that disciple's eyes deepened, but after rummaging through his storage bracelet, he discovered that there was still a gap to the amount of 1 divine-grade spirit stone. In truth, no matter which sect it was, to the higher-ups, a few 100 million or even a few billion divine-grade spirit stones were nothing, but to the disciples, 1 divine-grade spirit stone was not a small amount. After a brief moment of awkwardness, the disciple cupped his fists at Yu Qianqiu. "I hope sect master you can be magnanimous, allow me to go back and retrieve the money." Yu Qianqiu turned around, silently eating his food by the spoonful, ignoring that disciple, letting him do as he saw fit. The hunchbacked old man smiled at that disciple. It's fine, 1 bowl of food, it's free, no charge. That disciple looked at Yu Qianqiu, gritting his teeth, and flew away without a word. As the saying goes, good news never goes out, but bad news travels 1,000 li. While the crowd was watching Yu Qianqiu slowly eating his food, whispers and whispers could be heard. Several lights flickered in the air. The Wangu Tong disciple who had just run away was dragged back by someone. The person in the lead was none other than the Wangu Tong elder overseeing this place, Wangi. Seeing Yu Qianqiu, Wangi broke out in laughter. Sect Master Yu is indeed in a good mood, actually hiding here to enjoy delicious food. It's not really in a good mood, just stealing half a day of leisure. Yu Qianqiu also laughed heartily, as if nothing had happened between the two of them. Wangi walked up to Yu Qianqiu, noticing the oily green stuff in his bowl. He clicked his tongue in surprise. What is this stuff? How come I've never seen it before? Then he waved his hand at the grandfather and grandson. Come, give me a bowl too. He sat down opposite Yu Qianqiu. When the bowl of green clear food was placed on the table, Wangi took a small sip and nodded. It really has a unique flavor. Then he put down the spoon in his hand, ready to get down to business. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a wide smile. I wonder what my sect's disciple did to offend you, making you, great sect master Yu, personally make a move. I've already brought the person here, have him apologize to you. Both of them were smart people. It was easy to understand the meaning behind Wangi's words. On the surface, Wangi said he was here to apologize, but in reality, he was here to ask, you injured my Wangu Tong's disciple just for a piece of divine grade treasure? Aren't you not giving my Wangu Tong face? Wangi also understood that he couldn't do anything to Yu Qianqiu, but as the sect master overseeing this place, if he didn't say anything when his disciple was beaten up, he would lose face. He also believed that Yu Qianqiu was not an idiot. He would at least give him some face and let him step down. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu would tilt his head to look at the disciple, nonchalantly saying, there's no need for an apology. In my opinion, this kind of shameless disciple is a scourge if you keep him around, and it's also a disgrace to you, Wangu Tong. Why don't you just kill him and end all troubles once and for all? The moment Wangi said that, the disciple panicked, looking nervously at Wangi. Wangi's face tightened slightly, his voice solemn. Sect Master Yu's words, I don't understand. Then why don't you ask him what he did? Yu Qianqiu harumphed coldly, snickering coldly as he said, the food is clearly priced, you can choose not to eat it if you don't have money, it's not like it's something you can't live without. It doesn't matter if you don't have money to eat it, with your face as Elder One overseeing this place, I'll pay for it on his behalf without him even asking. What's more hateful is that he actually accused Wangi of swindling people, saying that Wangi's guts aren't small, daring to swindle Wangu Tong's people, using this as a pretext to grope the little girl in front of everyone, and even treating this old man like he's the same kind of trash. This is intolerable. Luckily this happened in the hallucinatory immortal city, otherwise this old man would have killed him on the spot. So that's how it is. The surrounding crowd hissed. Wangi tilted his head, glaring coldly at the disciple, barking, is Sect Master Yu's words true? I. The disciple stuttered with fear, stammering. Wangi sneered, you really dare to give our Wangu Tong face, cripple his cultivation, and request the sect master to expel him from the sect. Being the overseer of this place, he had the authority to enforce the law, but he didn't have the authority to expel a disciple from the sect. I know I was wrong, elder, spare me, aw. A miserable shriek rang out, the disciple wilted on the spot. His dantian was shattered by an expert from the same sect, his cultivation was crippled, and he was carried away by the other sect master. In the immortal world, this was merely the tragic end of a small fry that couldn't even cause a ripple. To those big shots, for the sake of their own reputation or the reputation of their organization, or for other reasons, the lives of small fries were nothing more than something they could casually take, not worth mentioning. However, it was enough to make those small fries tremble with fear, thinking that Wang Tong was strict in enforcing the law, but in truth, there were countless disciples like this in the big sections. That disciple was just unlucky enough to run into Yu Qianqiu's hands. The little girl in green who was hiding behind her grandfather would occasionally poke her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu, her eyes brimming with curiosity. Wang Yi waved his hand, the other disciples immediately turned into streaks of light and left. With a wave of his hand, this matter was over. Wang Yi then asked curiously, "Sect Master Yu, I heard that the immortal emperor personally sent a decree to you. I wonder if it's true." The people who were watching the commotion all perked up their ears. "It's just a rumor." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand humbly. At this time, 3 more golden streaks of light appeared. The one in the lead was the Great Bright Wheel. Yu Qianqiu and Wang Yi immediately stood up, bowing respectfully, "Greetings to the Great Bright Wheel Master." The surroundings instantly fell into silence. The Great Bright Wheel snorted coldly, "Yu Qianqiu, you really have guts, actually daring to hit people in my hallucinatory immortal city." Just when everyone was thinking that Yu Qianqiu was going to be out of luck, the Great Bright Wheel's hand behind the Great Bright Wheel's back dropped, slapping 2 items onto the table, saying indifferently, "I've already brought the items you wanted. Today, on account of the immortal emperor, I won't argue with you, but if there's a next time, I won't let you off so easily." Chapter 988. These were the words he said on the surface, but he also secretly transmitted his voice, "Brat, don't cause trouble in my territory. Why do I have so many reasons to protect you? How am I going to manage others in the future?" The Great Bright Wheel was gritting his teeth in anger. From this, it could be seen that he really treated Yu Qianqiu as one of his own because of Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng. If it was someone else, he would have taken care of them long ago. As long as they broke the rules, which sect would dare to reason with him? These words caused Yu Qianqiu to blush with shame. He felt that he had let the other party down. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but the Great Bright Wheel only let out a cold harumph. The 3 rays of light flew back to the Merchant Association. The surroundings were completely silent. The Great Bright Wheel's words shocked everyone. The meaning of "for the immortal emperor's sake" undoubtedly proved the rumors in the hallucinatory immortal city. It confirmed that Yu Qianqiu had indeed received the immortal emperor's decree to carry out a mission. At this moment, all sorts of expressions appeared on everyone's faces. Most of them were envious. Actually, Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised that the Great Bright Wheel brought out the immortal emperor. He didn't know that the Great Bright Wheel was not only helping him cover up the fight in the hallucinatory immortal city, it was also helping him get rid of some troubles, such as the Heartless Palace. This was the brilliance of the Great Bright Wheel. He could guarantee his own position and help his own people without leaving any traces. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on the 2 items that the Great Bright Wheel threw on the table. A storage bracelet and a token. Wang Yi stood in front and immediately recognized what this token was. He immediately said in shock, "Netherworld token." He looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He didn't know why the Great Bright Wheel gave this to him. So this was the Netherworld token. Yu Qianqiu picked up the palm-sized token on the table and looked at it. There was a mix of gold and black. He used the metal seal to check and found that it was actually a mix of nether iron and gold. The design of the token was actually very simple. It was surrounded by cloud patterns, and one side was engraved with the word "immortal," while the other side was engraved with the word "nether." However, the proportion of nether iron and gold mixed together was so well proportioned that even an average refiner would find it difficult to achieve. Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the person who made this token was also proficient in the gold incantation art. However, after thinking about it, he felt that it was unlikely. The gold incantation art was created by him, and he only taught it to Hongqi. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, he casually put away the netherworld passage token. Huang Xiaolong then picked up the storage bracelet. It was filled to the brim with divine-grade spirit stones. Without even counting, one storage bracelet could hold exactly 10 billion spirit stones. The immortal palace was so rich, yet they only gave 10 billion. How stingy! Yu Qianqiu muttered under his breath, then took out a handful of divine-grade spirit stones and put away the storage bracelet. Huang Xiaolong then beckoned to the green-clothed little girl who was looking at him curiously from behind his grandfather, signaling her to come over. The green-clothed little girl immediately shrunk her head back, but the hunchbacked old man pulled her out with a smile, hinting that it was fine for her to go over. The green-clothed little girl was very obedient to her grandfather's words. She slowly moved over with some apprehension, looking at Yu Qianqiu with a puzzled expression. "Stretch out your hand," Yu Qianqiu said, waving the handful of spirit stones in his hand. The green-clothed little girl's eyes lit up. Biting her lower lip, she obediently stretched out her delicate little hand, her 5 fingers adorable and delicate. 2 hands. Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. The little girl obediently stretched out her hands, and all the spirit stones in Yu Qianqiu's hands were put into her hands. She held the spirit stones in her hands, and without saying anything, she excitedly ran back to her grandfather's side. "It's too much, I don't need so much," the hunchbacked old man said fearfully, signaling the little girl to return the extra spirit stones to Yu Qianqiu. "Causing trouble for you, it's only right." Yu Qianqiu nodded at Wang Yi, then the two of them turned into a streak of light and flew away. As the two of them left, the onlookers went about their own business, whispering to each other about the immortal emperor's decree to Yu Qianqiu. No one cared about the ordinary grandfather-granddaughter duo. There were also some who wanted to try the green liquor the grandfather-granddaughter duo was selling because of what happened earlier, but the grandfather-granddaughter duo's action of packing up the stall dispelled their thoughts. The hunchbacked old man kept all the things on the stall into his storage bracelet, then pulled his granddaughter and flew out of the hallucinatory immortal city at a moderate pace. Many people only raised their heads to take a glance, then continued with their own business. To most people, there was nothing to be concerned about small fries, and they were even dismissive of them. What they were interested in were the interesting things that happened between the big shots. In a remote valley far away from the hallucinatory immortal city, the mountains were barren, the vegetation was barren, and the rocks were craggy. However, it seemed very quiet. The grandfather-granddaughter duo landed on the ground and slowly walked into the depths of the valley. As they walked, a wooden staff suddenly appeared in the hunchbacked old man's swinging hand. The wooden staff seemed to be made from 2 entangled tree roots, and the brown wooden staff's head was like a large Ganoderma, which looked very strange. The hunchbacked old man walked slowly with the help of the walking stick, his hunchback gradually straightened, and the outline of his body slowly became tall and sturdy. A cool mountain breeze blew over, and his white hair and beard gently fluttered. The drooping skin on his face silently tightened, and his complexion became rosy and smooth. His turbid eyes suddenly became clear and transparent, and his determined eyes revealed the vicissitudes and wisdom of seeing through the mortal world. At this moment, anyone could tell that he was the hunchbacked old man who bowed and scraped in the hallucinatory immortal city. The aura between the two of them instantly became like 2 different people. 2 images, one was like a poor old man who was living a destitute life, and the other was like an earth immortal who possessed great wisdom and transcended the mortal world. Unfortunately, no one could see the changes that occurred to the old man. In fact, if the old man didn't want others to see it, then how many people in this world could? On the other hand, the green-clothed little girl didn't show the slightest change. However, she wasn't surprised by the change in her grandfather, and it was obvious that she was used to it. Her green dress fluttered in the wind as she happily skipped through the craggy valley as if she was walking on flat ground. The wind fluttered her green dress, and she seemed like a celestial child that had descended to the mortal world. She played with 2 black spirit stones in her hands, and she occasionally raised her head to block the spirit stones in front of her eyes to look at the blue sky. She would occasionally let out a cheerful chuckle. "Grandfather, when are we going to set up the stall again?" The green-clothed little girl suddenly tilted her head and asked. The sturdy old man, who was walking with the crutch, suddenly stopped and looked at the little girl who was skipping happily in front of him with a complicated expression. The green-clothed little girl suddenly realized that her grandfather's figure had disappeared from her side. She stopped abruptly and turned her head to look. Seeing that her grandfather had stopped moving, she happily skipped back again. She pulled on her grandfather's crutch and asked curiously, "Grandfather, why aren't you walking?" The old man smiled faintly and said, "Luaire, do you like to play in the world?" The little girl called Luaire tilted her head and thought for a while. She nodded her head innocently and said, "I like it." "Why do you like it?" "Because there are a lot of people. It's very lively." Luaire waved her hands and made a gesture of many people. "There are a lot of people. Aren't you afraid of meeting the bad guys that grandfather told you about? Like the bad guys who didn't pay for your food and scared you. But there are also good people." Luaire held a spirit stone in each hand and waved it with a smile that was like a flower. She said, "That person called you Qiancho is a good person. A good person will help me beat up a bad person." As she said that, she made a trumpet shape with her hands and shouted towards the valley in the distance, "You Qiancho, you are a good person." Somewhere in the distance, someone was talking to someone when he suddenly sneezed and cursed, F***ck. "Who is cursing me? It must be that old bastard Grey Cloud Xian." After a cheerful shout, Lu happily jumped onto a rock. She spread her arms wide open on the rock and danced around in circles while giggling. She looked innocent and pure. The mountain wind blew her green skirt, and she was as light as a green butterfly that was about to flap its wings and fly. Then, a miraculous thing happened. In this desolate valley, wherever her delicate hands pointed to, the withered wild grass suddenly exploded with new vitality and grew at a visible speed. The withered yellow disappeared, and the emerald green wild grass swayed, at the point of her fingers. The broken rodden would instantly experience spring again. The tender green branches sprouted out and quickly grew thicker. New sprouts quickly bloomed on the branches. In a short while, the withered tree once again exploded with exuberant vitality. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a green tree, finger. The old branches of the withered wildflowers were growing healthily. It was clearly past the flowering season, but the flower buds were popping out one by one. They shyly bloomed all over the branches, and it was a beautiful sight, finger. The green vine was like a snake that had awoken from hibernation. It quickly burrowed out from the ground, dragging the green leaves that kept emerging from its body as it climbed all over the hills and slopes. This scene was so miraculous and inconceivable. In the snap of Luaire's fingers, there was a huge change. With her as the center, the desolate valley was overflowing with spring in the blink of an eye. Green trees formed shade, fragrant grass covered the ground, and hundreds of flowers bloomed. The desolate valley became a green field, making people feel relaxed and happy. Unfortunately, there was only one spectator in this scene. However, this spectator seemed to be used to this scene and did not even look at it. He pointed the wooden staff in his hand at the ground in front of him and said, "Luaire, stop messing around." The cheerful Luaire stuck out her tongue and jumped down from the rock. She obediently stood at the place her grandfather pointed at. The old man frowned and said, "Luaire, remember this. In the future, without my permission, you are not allowed to run out again. Especially you are not allowed to see that person called you Qiancho again." Luaire blinked and asked doubtfully, "Why?" The old man said with a serious expression, because he is the worst person. He is also the person who can hurt you the most. You have to stay far away from him. Why? LoveLore pouted disapprovingly and said, but I don't feel any malice from him. When the old man heard this, he immediately raised his wooden cane and tapped it on LoveLore's forehead. He warned solemnly, LoveLore, remember this. Anyone who can smell the fragrance on your body is a bad person. These people are not ordinary people. They will cause you great harm. You have to stay far away from them. Remember. Chapter 989. Is there a fragrance on my body? LoveLore raised her arm and sniffed. She avoided the main point and said, why can't I smell it? Dong. This time, the old man unceremoniously knocked LoveLore's head with his cane, causing her to cover her head and cry. The old man said angrily, even if you're curious, there must be a bottom line. You were bribed by him with a few spirit stones. Grandpa has lived for so long and has seen too much. Don't you know what's good and what's bad? Do you think Grandpa will lie to you? Remember Grandpa's words, stay away from that person called Enchanting. He's very dangerous. If you dare to disobey Grandpa, Grandpa will never let you come out to play. Oh. LoveLore said dejectedly. The old man wanted to scold her again, but he suddenly looked around and frowned. You little girl, you're messing around. You leaked the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and alarmed someone. Let's go back first to avoid chattering. He raised his staff and pointed at the empty air. The air in front of the two of them immediately faintly rippled with a pale green profound light. The old man grabbed LoveLore's arm and stepped into the profound light. The two of them immediately disappeared without a trace. The door of light disappeared into the air, and the valley was empty. Not long after the two of them disappeared, a golden light flashed in the distant sky. It was frighteningly fast, and in the blink of an eye, it landed in the valley. The newcomer stood steadily on the rock that LoveLore had just been dancing on. He wore a gorgeous golden robe embroidered with a sea of coiling dragons and clouds. He wore a hollowed-out golden crown with complicated patterns. Two thick eyebrows slanted to the left and right of his forehead. His nose was straight like an eagle's hook, and his lips were thin like two blades. His entire body was covered in a thin layer of golden light that was like a curling mist, making people feel intimidated. His entire person was imposing, and his slender eyes emitted a cold light that could take one's soul. The newcomer's cold gaze quickly scanned the entire valley. His perception quickly enveloped the entire valley like a tide. The nearby plants and flowers moved without wind, rising and falling like waves. However, he did not discover anything. Of course, it was not that he did not discover anything unusual. The two ends of the valley were barren. Only the area around him was overflowing with greenery. One look and he knew something was strange. I thought you called me out to meet. Strange. When has old man Moo ever done something so senseless? The person glanced at the surroundings again and muttered with a frown, why are you hiding? I have no ill intentions towards you. I just want to ask you about some things. Sigh. With a long sigh, the person turned into a streak of golden light and disappeared into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. No one knew what had happened in this remote valley. Enchanting didn't know that he had been talked about here. He had just come out from the Wangu Tong branch, and Wangi had personally sent him to the entrance. The two of them looked up at the sky almost at the same time. The four heartless palace disciples who had been staring at Enchanting had disappeared. Wangi chuckled and said, it seems that Ash Grey Cloud Trust has also retreated and withdrawn his people. I thought he really had the guts to go against the Immortal Palace. Enchanting immediately rolled his eyes and said, what do you mean by that? What does my business with him have to do with the Immortal Palace? I, Enchanting, am an upright person. I will never use my power to oppress others. He looked in the direction of the Heartless Palace branch and said in a low voice, I am preparing to make a trip to the Heartless Palace to see if the grudge between me and him can be resolved. Ha! Wangui smiled and nodded. He thought to himself, you call this not using your power to oppress others? Why didn't I see you looking for him to resolve your grudge in the past? Of course, he definitely wouldn't say this out loud. After sending Yu Qianqiu off with cupped fists, he couldn't help but frown and mumble to himself, why is this guy asking about the casting of the body in the 72 worlds? After thinking for a while, he still couldn't figure it out, so he shook his head and walked in quickly. He still had to pass on the news to the Wangu Tong Palace. Outside the Heartless Palace branch, the people going in and out stopped at the entrance and whispered to each other. They watched as Yu Qianqiu slowly walked in with his hands clasped behind his back. They couldn't figure out what he was doing here. Those who had come to buy things and were about to leave didn't leave either. They all stayed to watch the show. A disciple of the Heartless Palace had already discovered him and quickly ran back inside to report it. Therefore, before Yu Qianqiu could step into the Heartless Palace branch, he was blocked at the entrance by Zhongyun Xian and his people. Zhongyun Xian's face darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, what are you doing here? He was worried now. He was worried that this fearless guy would purposely come here to cause trouble because he had received the Celestial Emperor's decree. However, he couldn't touch this guy now. Honored Zhongyun, long time no see. Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his fists. I am here to apologize to you. I hope you won't pursue what happened in the past. Everyone looked at each other. No matter how they listened, it was a little boring. Zhongyun Xian's face darkened. He snorted and said, don't give me that. If you have something to say, say it. If you have anything to say, say it. He didn't believe that this guy was here to apologize. Moreover, the grudge between them wasn't something that could be resolved with just an apology. Yu Qianqiu looked at the people behind him. He turned back and said with a smile, look at this public place. It's inconvenient to say some things here. Let's talk inside. Then, he walked inside. Zhongyun Xian had never seen such a shameless person. He immediately stopped him. If you want to say it, then say it here. If not, then scram. I don't welcome you here. Zhongyun Xian, don't be too ruthless. Yu Qianqiu slowly took a few steps back. He said in a low voice, yes, I killed your grandson. But even if you kill me, your grandson can't come back to life. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Moreover, I helped you a lot. It's enough to cancel out the grudge. Why do you insist on biting me? You've done me a huge favor. Zhongyun Xian was startled. He then sneered. Are you kidding me? Stop talking nonsense. Scram. I don't welcome you here. Hee hee. What an ungrateful fella. Yu Qianqiu placed his hands on his waist. You dare to say that if it wasn't for me, you could have broken through to the middle stage of Immortal Emperor? You dare to say that if it wasn't for me, you could have mastered the 3 swords into 1 sword stance? I only hate that I didn't kill you back then. Zhongyun Xian gritted his teeth. So you're saying that the grudge between us can't be resolved? Yu Qianqiu said in a low voice. Zhongyun Xian shouted. That's right. Forget it. It's fine if it can't be resolved. Yu Qianqiu's expression instantly brightened up. He generously waved his hand and gently said, today, I came to discuss cooperation with you. He was like a completely different person from a moment ago. Not interested. Zhongyun Xian couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with this fella. He turned and walked into the hall. He said, disciples of Heartless Palace, listen up. Don't let him in. If he dares to force his way in, inform the Merchant Association to uphold justice. He had no choice. He couldn't attack this fella in the current situation. Everyone's eyes were on Yu Qianqiu. They didn't know if this fella would really force his way in. Sigh. Why do you have to do this? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. To everyone's surprise, he turned around and flew away in a streak of light. Yu Qianqiu landed in front of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance's gate. He walked to the gate and took out the World Commerce Chamber's token. He waved it at the two guards at the gate and said, "World Commerce Chamber's Sect Master Yu Qianqiu requests an audience with the Great Bright Will Executor." Wait a minute. The guard threw down this sentence and went in to report. Not long later, he came out and waved his hand. "Controller wants you to find him in the backyard." Yu Qianqiu walked into the Merchant Association and looked around. He passed through the main hall and came to the backyard. He saw the Great Bright Will sitting cross-legged on a stone platform under an old tree. Yu Qianqiu went over and bowed. "Greetings, Controller." The Great Bright Will slowly opened its eyes and looked at him. It frowned. "Why do you want to see me? I'm warning you, don't think you can swindle the Immortal Palace just because you received the Immortal Emperor's decree. You'll die a horrible death sooner or later." He guessed that this fella didn't come here for anything good. Maybe it was to ask for something. "What are you saying? Am I the kind of person who wants a yard after taking an inch?" Yu Qianqiu smiled. De Mingluan snorted noncommittally and said indifferently, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. It's like this." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and laughed. "Look, I'm going out to collect some local customs in order to compose a song that will be passed down through the ages for the Immortal Emperor's wedding. Can you ask the Immortal Palace to send a message to the Heartless Palace to send the Great Elder, Zhangyun Xian, to protect me and accompany me to collect local customs?" De Mingluan was stunned. He had long been thinking about Yu Qianqiu's intentions for coming. He had thought about everything, but no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't think of why Yu Qianqiu would make such a request. After a while, the Great Bright Will sneered. "You must be out of your mind. Everyone knows you have a grudge against Zhangyun Xian. What reason do I have to report to the Immortal Palace to send such a decree to the Heartless Palace? It's because I have a grudge against Zhangyun Xian that I picked him." Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a bitter smile. "Think about it. I'm going to the Netherworld to collect local customs. You should know better than me how dangerous the Netherworld is. If there's no master to protect me, I'm afraid I won't even know how I died. Most importantly, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. I'm afraid that there's someone in a high position who doesn't dare to make a move against me in the celestial world but will do something to me in the Netherworld. If the Immortal Palace sends Zhangyun Xian to protect me and something happens to me in the Netherworld and ruin the Immortal Emperor's plan, he won't be able to escape punishment. Plus, I'm always on edge thinking that there's a master who wants to do something to me. I can't concentrate on composing a song for the Immortal Emperor." In short, he was the most reasonable person in the world. The reason why he went to talk to Zhangyun Xian about reconciliation and cooperation was to get Zhangyun Xian to protect him. Who knew that Zhangyun Xian wouldn't even give him a chance to continue talking? So he asked the Great Bright Will to ask the Immortal Palace to pressure the Heartless Palace. Chapter 990. However, now that things had come to this, he had to use, but, to explain it. This fellow was not a good person at all. He always believed in the concept of cutting weeds if the roots were not removed. What cooperation and enmity were all nonsense. Finding Ash Cloud Xian to protect him was a lie. He wanted to find a chance to kill him. Normally, the best way was to flatten the entire Heartless Palace. However, it was impossible for him to flatten a colossus like the Heartless Palace with his current abilities. However, Taking advantage of his current status as an Imperial envoy, it was still possible to think of a way to kill Grey Cloud Exaian first. This was why he spent so much effort to get Ash Cloud Exaian to protect him. The reason, first of all, the chances of encountering danger in the Netherworld were very high, so they really needed the help of an expert. With Grey Cloud Exaian's current cultivation and the Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword-drawing stance, he was really a suitable candidate. Just the thought of having such an expert by his side made him excited. Secondly, as he said, Ash Cloud Exaian might not dare to do anything to him in the open, but it was completely possible for him to do something in the dark, especially in the Netherworld where even immortal emperors could not interfere. Now, the only way was to tie Tsangyan Exaian's safety together, then Tsangyan Exaian wouldn't dare to make a move against him. Lastly, this was what he wanted to do the most. As long as he brought Ash Cloud Exaian with him, he would have a chance to get rid of this hidden danger. After all, Ash Cloud Exaian would not dare to do anything to him at that time. Instead, he would have to work hard to protect him, and he would be able to do anything to him. Such a black-hearted method of killing several birds with one arrow had always been easy for him. Is that really the case? De Mingluan looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. Although he said that, he did not think that Yu Qianqiu had the guts or the ability to do anything to Ash Cloud Exaian. He had underestimated Yu Qianqiu's character. If I don't do this, who can guarantee that Ash Cloud Exaian will not do anything to me in the dark? Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly as he cupped his fists and said, "Please help me, Senior Great Bright Wheel, for the sake of Senior Yun and Senior Wei." De Mingluan's eyes flickered with suspicion. He was experienced enough to sense that something was wrong. Asking his enemy to protect him. This was the first time he had heard of such a thing after living for so many years. He didn't know what this guy's brain was made of. How could he think of such a way? But after thinking about it, he felt that Yu Qianqiu's concerns were not wrong. He paused and said, "I'll try my best. As for whether the Immortal Palace will agree to your request, I can't guarantee it. Wait for my news." Hee hee. "Thank you, Senior. I won't disturb you any longer. Go on with your business." Yu Qianqiu bowed and left. He was confident in De Mingluan's ability. Since the other party had promised to try his best, then this matter should not be far from the truth. As for what the other party would say to make the Immortal Palace agree, that was not something he should worry about. In the large conference room on the 21st floor of the World Commerce Association, under the watchful eyes of Yu Qianqiu, Hu Changshou distributed the corresponding amount of restriction-breaking pills, marrow-cleansing pills, and immortal ascension pills to everyone. Everyone looked at the immortal pills in their hands with mixed feelings. Yu Qianqiu had already explained the pros and cons of taking these immortal pills. Although they could quickly improve their cultivation, there would be a certain shackle on their future cultivation after taking them. Very few people could break through to the great immortal stage and above. Looking at the complicated expressions on everyone's faces, Yu Qianqiu understood what everyone was thinking. If these immortal pills fell into the hands of ordinary soul formation cultivators with no background, they would definitely be overjoyed. But these people were not ordinary soul formation cultivators. Each of them had extraordinary wisdom. Although they were temporarily hiding here, who didn't want their cultivation to reach the peak of cultivation one day? I've already explained everything clearly to everyone. It's up to you whether you want to take it or not. I won't force you. But there's something I want to remind everyone. Yu Qianqiu looked around at everyone and said in a low voice, "If anyone is willing to take it and use it to improve their cultivation, when you go to the Immortal Ascension Passage guarded by the Immortal Palace to forge your immortal body, you must go in batches. When the first batch returns, the second batch will go again to avoid unnecessary trouble." At this point, he didn't say anything else and walked out alone. As for why he didn't use the heavenly lightning to forge everyone's immortal body, he had his own considerations. The hundreds of people here were all in the open. If they used immortal pills to forcefully increase their cultivation, no one could say anything. But if they suddenly all reached the immortal realm without going through the immortal ascension passage guarded by the immortal palace, not to mention the suspicion of others, the immortal palace would first set their eyes on the World Commerce Association. Some things had to be sacrificed before they could gain. It was impossible for everything to be smooth sailing forever. Yu Qianqiu could only sigh slightly. He still had to hide what he had to hide from everyone for the time being. Who knew that once he left the conference room, he would receive a jade talisman from Wei Qianqiu, asking him to quickly go to the rooftop. Yu Qianqiu arrived at the rooftop with a face full of suspicion. Just as he was wondering what Wei Qianqiu was doing, he saw that De Mingluan was also there. He immediately walked over cheerfully and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Master." Wei Qianqiu stared at him with an annoyed expression and asked, "What the hell are you doing? You actually need Grey Cloud Messenger to protect you. Did you take the wrong medicine?" Clearly, De Mingluan had already told them about this. "As you wish." De Mingluan snorted. "The Immortal Palace has already sent a decree to Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing." Yu Qianqiu's eyes instantly lit up. He asked, "Heartless Palace agreed? You don't have to worry about this." De Mingluan's gaze suddenly stared in the direction of the Heartless Palace's branch. He said indifferently, "There is no room for negotiation with the decree from the Immortal Palace. He has to agree whether he wants to or not." Hee. That's good, that's good." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands happily. He was worried that this matter would be troublesome. He didn't expect De Mingluan to help him settle it so quickly. He was indeed capable. Who knew that De Mingluan would look at him coldly and pour cold water on him? Don't be too happy too early. The reason why the Immortal Palace can send this decree is because of the Immortal Emperor. The higher-ups want me to tell you that if the Immortal Emperor isn't satisfied with the result, he will hand you over to the Heartless Palace and let them do whatever they want to you. Yu Qianqiu couldn't smile anymore. It was as if something was strangling his neck. He then said awkwardly, "It should be fine. As long as Tsangyan Axian cooperates with me, I won't disappoint the Immortal Emperor. Please help me pass this message to the Immortal Palace." He was indeed scared just now. After all, no one could guarantee that the Immortal Emperor would be satisfied with what they came up with. But on second thought, if he really messed things up, he really didn't believe that the Immortal Palace had the ability to capture him. He still had some confidence in his ability to escape. De Mingluan nodded slightly. His gaze paused on Wei Qianqiu and Yunpeng's faces. Then, he slowly took out a golden token and handed it to Yu Qianqiu. "You said you want to go to the Netherworld, but the Netherworld is not like the Celestial Realm. It is already out of the Immortal Palace's control. It is the Emperor of the Underworld's territory. Plus, the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor have always had small conflicts. No one can guarantee their safety if they go there. Most importantly, even though the Emperor of the Underworld is revered in the Netherworld, because the territory is too vast, the majority of the places have always been in a chaotic situation where warlords are divided. This is the token of authority of the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. Maybe it can help you at a critical moment." Wei Qianqiu and Yunpeng looked at each other without saying anything. They both glanced at Yunpeng with complicated expressions. Yu Qianqiu, who received the token, was also slightly startled. On one side of the golden token, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce's logo was engraved. On the other side, there was a moonlit night scene of clouds passing by and a bright moon shining in the sky. This token was the symbol of him, De Mingluan, representing the Immortal Palace to be in charge of the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. Regardless of whether this token was useful in the Netherworld or not, Yu Qianqiu would remember the De Mingluan's friendship. However, this was a different matter. He still had to ask clearly what he needed to ask. It would be troublesome if he did something stupid in the Netherworld. Yu Qianqiu paused and asked, "Didn't you say that the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld always had small conflicts? Your authority token is also useful in the Netherworld." Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng were more or less confused about this. The Demingluan faintly smiled. Although the Netherworld is chaotic, there is always an Onyx army everywhere in the Netherworld to suppress those restless fellows. This Onyx army is under the command of Madame Heiqi. Madame Heiqi is also the only subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld who has the most frequent business dealings with the Immortal World. Although she has never been to the Immortal World, because I am in charge of the World Commerce Chamber in the Immortal World, I have personally gone to the Onyx Palace in the Netherworld several times. Among the people in the Immortal World, I am the one who has the most contact with Madame Heiqi, and we have some friendship. She will give me some face if there is anything. Madame Heiqi? Wei Chuanqiu asked curiously. I have never heard of this person before. I cultivated. Is she the woman who is rumored to have hooked up with the Emperor of the Underworld? She is quite a fast climber. Yu Qianqiu was also curious. He had heard of Madame Heiqi in the Immortal World. It was said that she had a high position in the Netherworld. However, these were all rumors. He didn't know the specifics. Hooked up with the Emperor of the Underworld? Is it that easy to hook up with the Emperor of the Underworld? Forget it. In short, this woman is the Emperor of the Underworld's favorite concubine. Her power in the Netherworld is indeed extraordinary. Demingluan shook his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. You are in the chaotic land of the Netherworld. If you encounter any trouble, you can use my token to find the Onyx army. I believe Madame Heiqi will ask the Onyx army to take care of you. With the Onyx army's illustrious reputation in the chaotic land, they can at least save you some trouble. Yu Qianqiu nodded and asked hesitantly, I wonder what kind of person this Madame Heiqi is. Is it easy to get along with her? Demingluan paused for a moment and said slowly with an expressionless face, her cultivation is about the same as mine, but her heart is higher than the sky. She may be ambitious, but her ability is average. She is just relying on the prestige of the Emperor of the Underworld. Unfortunately, she doesn't know her place. In short, she is just a vicious woman. You won't have any conflict of interest with her. As long as you don't offend her, she won't do anything to you. Chapter 991. Got it. Yu Qianqiu put away the token. He was a little excited. What did it mean to be on his side? This was what it meant to be on his side. Yun Peng, who had been silent all this while, suddenly asked, Yu Qianqiu brought your token to the Netherworld to show off. Will you be in trouble if news of this gets back? Demingluan smiled. What trouble can I get into? I just accepted the Immortal Emperor's decree to help Yu Qianqiu as much as I can. If someone asks, I'll just say this. Hearing this, the three heaved a sigh of relief. Some people were happy, while others were worried. In the back room of the Passionless Palace's branch, there was a series of crashing noises. The disciples who ran in to see what was going on were chased out by a shout of scram. The tables and chairs inside were all smashed to pieces, and Sung-in Axayan was panting heavily as he stood on the broken wood with a red face and neck. High Priest, please calm down. An old man on the side sighed. This person was called Meihe. He was also one of the priests of Passionless Palace. His position in Passionless Palace was second only to Grey Cloud Axayan. He came because Passionless Palace had received the decree from the Immortal Palace. It asked Grey Cloud Axayan to protect Yu Qianqiu. After Passionless Palace's sect master Wang Qing received the decree, he was silent for a long time. No one would be able to accept that they had to protect their enemy after their grandson was killed. Therefore, Wang Qing didn't send a message to Grey Cloud Axayan. Instead, he asked Meihe to come personally. He was afraid that Grey Cloud Axayan couldn't understand and asked Meihe to do the thinking. Before Mei came, Wang Qing had told him that if Grey Cloud Xian couldn't accept it, he could contact him. As expected, Grey Cloud Xian was furious. He really couldn't understand it. He almost destroyed the Passionless Palace's branch. Finally, under Mei's repeated persuasion, Grey Cloud Xian contacted Wang Qing angrily. Wang Qing didn't try to persuade him. He only told him that it was true. He did receive the decree from the Immortal Palace. He told him to think of the big picture. Then, Wang Qing cut off the connection, which led to the current scene, just for a song, just for a song. The Immortal Palace has gone too far. Sect leader, why are you forcing me like this? Why are you forcing me like this? Sunyan Xian was so angry that his entire body trembled as he roared, "You Qianqiu." To him, this was simply an extraordinary humiliation. Not to mention the fact that he couldn't accept it emotionally. Once this matter was spread out, he would definitely become the laughing stock of the three realms. Mei quickly glanced at his surroundings. Fortunately, he had set up a soundproof barrier in advance. Otherwise, if Grey Cloud Xian's voice was heard, it might cause a lot of trouble for the Heartless Palace. Using his feet to push aside the broken tables and chairs, Mei walked to Grey Cloud Xian and said with a bitter smile, "You can't blame the sect master for this. Others see our Heartless Palace as the #1 sect in the immortal world, but don't tell me you and I don't know the situation our Heartless Palace is in. It's as dangerous as a pile of eggs. Why are they bullying people like this? Why are you bullying me like this? What do you take us for? Were they worse than pigs and dogs? This is a great humiliation." Grey Cloud Xian clenched his fists and choked with sorrow. Tears streamed down his face, covering his clothes. The scene was very tragic. This undoubtedly explained the problem. He knew that there were some things he couldn't fight back. High Priest. Mei grabbed Grey Cloud Xian's clenched fists and shook them. "Aren't we worse than pigs and dogs in the Immortal Palace's eyes? Do you think the sect master is feeling good? But we have to look at the big picture." As he spoke, he suddenly transmitted his voice. "I'm afraid that the Immortal Palace is using Yu Qianqiu to test our Heartless Palace." "What does this mean?" "Before we came, the sect master told me to tell you, endure humiliation for the greater good. The sect master told me to tell you that his cultivation level is probably not far from breaking through to the late Immortal Emperor stage. Also, our Heartless Palace already has the 6th form of the sword drawing style. The sect master has been hiding it all this time, waiting for the moment when he's certain of victory." Grey Cloud Xian's body shook when he heard this. His eyes were filled with tears as he exclaimed, "The 6th form. Could it be that the sect master?" He wanted to say that the sect master was waiting for the right time to challenge the Immortal Emperor, but Mei patted his fists and stopped him with telepathic transmission. "High Priest, be careful with your words. The sect leader has never mentioned this matter to anyone. He doesn't even feel at ease communicating with you through the transmission technique. But in order to let you know what's going on, he leaked this matter and specially asked me to make this trip. We can't let down the sect leader's painstaking efforts. What the sect master needs the most now is time. Once the time is right, all the old and new grudges can be settled in one day." Grey Cloud Xian was stunned and didn't speak. His eyes were shining. He really didn't expect that the Heartless Palace only had 5 sword stances for so many years. Ever since he was in a desperate situation, he instantly comprehended and executed the 5th stance. He was the clearest about its might. He was confident that few experts in the intermediate stage of the 3 realms would be able to block this move of his. But he didn't expect that the sect master had already created the 6th form of the sword drawing style. How powerful would it be? He couldn't help but get excited thinking about it. He naturally understood the sect master's painstaking efforts. He wanted him to endure the humiliation and give the sect master more time. Once the sect master broke through to the late-stage immortal emperor, the Heartless Palace's sixth form of the sword-drawing style would be revealed in the celestial world. At that time, it would definitely shock the three realms. For the sect master, for the Heartless Palace, Greycloud Exaen, will swallow this humiliation. Greycloud Exaen clenched his fists and said while gritting his teeth. Since he could get to this point in the celestial world, he naturally knew what was good and what was bad. Once the sect leader Wang Qing defeated the celestial emperor with the sixth move, the sword-drawing style, then the status of him, the number 2 figure of the Heartless Palace, in the celestial world could be imagined. High Priest, you're so righteous. May he patted Greycloud Exaen's fist. His tense gaze relaxed, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Before he came, Wang Qing had told him that if he told Greycloud Exaen such a top-secret matter and Greycloud Exaen still wasn't willing to endure the humiliation, then what was the point of keeping such a person in the Heartless Palace? To be exact, if Mei He had seen even the slightest hesitation in Greycloud Exaen, he would have immediately launched a fatal sneak attack when Greycloud Exaen was unprepared. That way, he would never have the chance to reveal the secret of the sect master Wang Qing. After that, the Heartless Palace would naturally push the blame onto Greycloud Exaen. If Greycloud Exaen was dead, then Yu Qianqiu wouldn't have an excuse to say that he was worried that Greycloud Exaen would backstab him and affect his work for the Immortal Emperor. At least he would be able to answer to the Immortal Palace. In reality, the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing didn't want to be too ruthless. After all, apart from him, the only person in the Heartless Palace who had mastered the 3-sword drawing style was Greycloud Exaen. He was definitely a great help to the Heartless Palace. If Wang Qing really defeated the Immortal Emperor in the future, how could he not have a reliable top-notch expert under him? However, people at Wang Qing's level would weigh the pros and cons of everything and would never be soft-hearted when it came to abandoning things. Greycloud Exaen didn't know that he had already taken a trip to the gates of hell. Instead, he swore solemnly and gritted his teeth. Yu Qianqiu, let's see how long you can be so smug for. Mei He sneered. He's just a fox borrowing the tiger's might. A mantis trying to stop a chariot is overestimating its own capabilities. High Priest, you'll have to suffer for a while. After the Immortal Emperor's wedding, we'll find a chance to deal with him. At this moment, a disciple outside weakly shouted, High Priest, World Commerce's sect master Yu Qianqiu is outside asking to see you. Damned bastard, he really came quickly. Is he here to humiliate me? Greycloud Exaen pointed his finger towards the outside, once again with a look of uncontrollable anger. Mei He shook his head at him. He looked at the messy room and quickly put all the messy things into his storage bracelet. Greycloud Exaen calmed his emotions and wiped his face to dry the tears on his clothes. Then, he removed the soundproof barrier and shouted, Get him in here. This shout was so loud that even Yu Qianqiu, who was outside the gate, was shocked, let alone the yes-man disciples outside. He muttered in his heart, Could it be that this old man is so daring that he dares to harm me? He wondered if Heartless Palace had conveyed the Immortal Palace's decree to this old man. However, he felt that he was worrying too much. Since this old man wanted him to get in here, then he must have received a notice. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He didn't wait for the disciple who went to report to come out to summon him, and he walked in casually. With Greycloud Exaen's shout, the other disciples of Heartless Palace didn't stop him. However, the disciples who came here to trade looked at him with disdain. They didn't know why this guy wouldn't let Greycloud Exaen go. They guessed that this guy was using his master's power. With the Immortal Emperor's decree, he was purposely humiliating Greycloud Exaen. Was this revenge for the humiliation he suffered in the Paradise Wonderland? When Yu Qianqiu entered the inner room of the rear hall, he discovered that the room was empty. He couldn't help but feel that it was strange. However, when he saw traces of tables and chairs on the floor, he quickly swept his gaze around the room. When he saw traces of things being smashed on the floor and walls, he immediately understood everything. Someone was probably furious and was smashing things to vent his anger. Finally, his gaze landed on an old man who was standing side by side with Greycloud Exayan. Someone who could stand side by side with Greycloud Exayan naturally had a high status in Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. Then, he smiled and cupped his hands at Greycloud Exayan. "Elder Greycloud Exayan, may I know who this person is?" Without Greycloud Exayan's introduction, Mei-He snorted coldly and said, "This old man is Heartless Palace's consecrator, Mei-He. You are that infamous scoundrel sect master Yu Qianqiu in the immortal world." The immortal palace's decree only asked Greycloud Exayan to protect Yu Qianqiu. It didn't say that he couldn't be humiliated. These words were no less than a slap to the face. Yu Qianqiu was unhappy when he heard it. He could be afraid of anyone but the Heartless Palace. If he retreated now, Greycloud Faith's face would be ugly in the future. Damn! This can't be allowed to continue. His face darkened. "I don't care if you don't have a river or a ditch. You're already so old. Watch your mouth. Don't ask for trouble." Chapter 992. How dare you? Mei-He shouted angrily. One of his sleeves bulged as if it was filled with air, and his killing intent instantly boiled. Sungyin Exayan pressed his hand and said gloomily, "Don't bother with him. It's too easy for him to kill him like this." Mei-He was slightly stunned. He was here to persuade Sungyin Exayan to swallow the humiliation. Why was it Sungyin Exayan who was persuading him now? Little did he know that some things did not happen to him. Putting oneself in someone else's shoes and experiencing it personally were two completely different things. With his identity and status, how many people dared to bully him? Yu Qianqiu's mouth was born to provoke people like them. Ordinary people could not bear it, let alone a person who was usually high and mighty. "Kill me." Yu Qianqiu's face wrinkled and he sneered, "I'm standing right here. Try and touch me if you have the guts." "I don't think you have the guts." His eyes fell on Sungyin Exayan's gloomy old face, and he said word by word, "I'm not in the mood to talk nonsense with you now. I'll give you 1 day to prepare. Leave with me tomorrow. Goodbye." He turned and left. "You're courting death," Sungyin Exayan shouted. He was indeed irritated. Mei-He was shocked and quickly pulled him back. Yu Qianqiu looked back at the two of them and sneered. He left without saying a word. It could be said that he came in high spirits but returned in disappointment. He felt that he was not surprised at all. This was the effect he wanted. He wanted to test the other party's bottom line. In the end, only the two old brothers were left in the room. After a long time, Sungyin Exayan turned to Mei-He and said, "Now you know that this bastard should be killed." Mei-He felt a little dumbfounded and could only sigh slightly. "Let's focus on the overall situation." Then he frowned slightly and said, "Why do I feel that this matter is a little strange? Could this kid be plotting something? Him? How dare he?" Sungyin Exayan looked disdainful. Mei-He shook his head and said in a low voice, "How many people with his cultivation have you seen dare to treat us like this? How can he be so calm in front of us? How can an ordinary rogue have this kind of calmness? He probably had ulterior motives for doing so. High Reverend, it's best to be careful. He's just relying on the support of the immortal palace." Sungyin Exayan coldly snorted. Although that was what he said, it could be seen from his slightly contracted pupils that he was already on guard. Not long after the two of them calmed down, a disciple who was in charge of gathering information suddenly came to report that rumors were spreading in the illusory immortal city, saying that the immortal palace had ordered the Grey Cloud letters to protect Yu Qianqiu. Upon hearing this news, Sungyin Exayan, who had finally calmed down, was stunned. Although he knew that this matter would spread sooner or later, and he would lose face sooner or later, it just had to come at this time. Without thinking, he immediately associated it with Yu Qianqiu. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He roared, "How dare you! Sooner or later, I'll tear you to pieces." With a flushed face, he swung his palm. Boom! A wall collapsed, and dust filled the air. The two brothers stood there motionlessly. The entire illusory immortal city was indeed in an uproar because of this news. Everyone felt that this was impossible. How was it possible for Zhongyun Xian to protect the enemy who killed his grandson, Yu Qianqiu? Therefore, everyone continuously verified the authenticity of the news. In the end, the more they couldn't find the truth, the more exaggerated the rumors became. The next day, Yu Qianqiu, who had settled the matters of the World Commerce Association, once again descended in high spirits outside the Passionless Palace branch. He amiably nodded at the disciples who were originally entering and exiting the branch but were now stunned at the entrance. He smiled at the hostile Passionless Palace disciples and said, "Tell Zhongyun Xian that he can leave." As he watched the Passionless Palace disciples leave in a hurry, Yu Qianqiu calmly stood with his arms crossed and looked into the hall with a smile. He wanted to see if Zhongyun Xian could restrain himself by spreading the rumors all over the place and provoking Zhongyun Xian over and over again. If he didn't figure out the other party's bottom line, he would feel guilty. If the other party suddenly launched a sneak attack while the two of them were interacting, then he would be out of luck. It would be good to give the other party a heads up and strengthen the other party's immunity to provocation. Indeed, some time passed. The two gloomy brothers finally adjusted their mentality and slowly walked out. Under everyone's unblinking gaze, Zhongyun Xian stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked in a low voice, "Where are we going?" He more or less resigned to his fate. The disciples from the various sects who were watching the show looked at each other in tacit understanding. The meaning behind his words couldn't be clearer. Needless to say, the rumors were true. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and said, "You'll know when we get there." The corner of Zhongyun Xian's mouth twitched. He saw that Yu Qianqiu had already taken out a flying shuttle into the air and flashed onto it. He waved at him from above, indicating for him to come up quickly. As he cupped his hands to send him off, Zhongyun Xian finally gritted his teeth and flashed onto the shuttle. He tried his best to turn his head away from Yu Qianqiu's ugly face. "Where are we going?" Yu Qianqiu said slowly and unhurriedly, "The Netherworld." Zhongyun Xian was stunned. He turned around to look at the other party, only to see the other party reaching out to the front of the flying shuttle. He immediately sneered and said, "The decree I received from the Immortal Palace is only to protect you. I have no obligation to help you control the flying shuttle. The journey to the Netherworld is long. Don't you think that with your cultivation, it will be faster to control it? What does it have to do with me whether it's faster or not? I'm not in a hurry." Zhongyun Xian sneered again and again. It was already embarrassing enough. How could he help Yu Qianqiu control the flying shuttle in front of everyone? "I have nothing to say. If you ruin the Immortal Emperor's plan, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences." Yu Qianqiu was also stubborn. However, Zhongyun Xian was not moved. "Don't give me that. Do you think the people of the Immortal Palace are all idiots? Fine. I won't talk about this anymore. I don't want you to say that I'm using the Immortal Emperor to threaten you. You don't put the Immortal Emperor in your eyes anyway." Yu Qianqiu looked around the entire illusory immortal city and said, "I can control it too. I was just about to bring you around illusory immortal city a few more times and let everyone witness the might of your gray cloud trust." Zhongyun Xian snorted and slowly floated to the side of the flying shuttle. He sneered and said, "The flying shuttle is yours. Go around as many times as you want. Sorry, I won't be accompanying you." The conversation between the two of them was clearly heard by the people below, and some of them even couldn't help but laugh. Good. Very good. You win. Ouch. At this time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly exclaimed. He clutched his chest and staggered a few steps on the flying shuttle as if his heart was in pain. Under Zhang Yunxian's cold gaze, the flying shuttle carrying Yu Qianqiu slowly landed in front of the Passionless Palace's branch gate. While everyone was looking at each other, Yu Qianqiu staggered to the back of the flying shuttle and sat down. He weakly waved his hand at the crowd and said intermittently, May I know who is willing to do a good deed and help me tell the Chamber of Commerce Alliance that I've been angered to the point where I'm depressed and my mental state isn't good. I'm afraid I'll need to rest for 1.5 years, and I'm afraid I'll miss the Immortal Emperor's important matter. I hope the Immortal Palace can find someone better to take on the heavy responsibility. After saying that, he lay on the flying shuttle and panted as if he could stop breathing at any time. Everyone was speechless. No matter what, he was the sect master of the World Commerce Alliance. This guy was really bold to play so openly and use the Immortal Emperor's matter to threaten others. But then again, if this matter really got out of hand, even if the Immortal Palace took care of Yu Qianqiu, how could he, Zhang Yunxian, who played along with Yu Qianqiu, have a good ending? This was clearly a case of the barefooted not afraid of those who wore shoes. He was acting shamelessly. Zhang Yunxian, who was in the air, and Mei He, who was at the gate, had dark expressions on their faces. The surroundings were completely silent. Everyone's gazes looked at Zhang Yunxian from time to time, then looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was about to fall asleep in the flying shuttle, High Priest. Mei He's voice came to Zhang Yunxian's ears with a long sigh. Zhang Yunxian's expression changed. Right now, he wanted to skin Yu Qianqiu alive, but, in the end, he still gave in. In his eyes, Yu Qianqiu was just a little trash, and it was not worth it for him to be unlucky together with him. The figure in the air suddenly disappeared, and Zhang Yunxian stood at the front of the flying shuttle on the ground. A gust of air rushed in all directions, and the flying shuttle suddenly stabbed into the sky. The Passionless Palace branch's gate was filled with boos and hisses. Yu Qianqiu, who was lying in the flying shuttle with his eyes half closed, finally opened his eyes. Looking at the white clouds floating in the blue sky, the resentment he felt from being humiliated in front of everyone in the Paradise Immortal realm was finally vented a little, and his entire body felt much better. Looking at Zhang Yunxian in front of him, who didn't even turn his head back, the scenes that had happened in Wu Xiong's mansion once again appeared in his mind. In fact, it didn't take more than a day for the things that had happened in the hallucination Immortal City to spread to Wu Xiong's External Affairs Grand Commander's mansion in the Paradise Immortal realm. In the beautiful back garden, in a pavilion with rolled-up beaded curtains, the golden-robed External Affairs Grand Commander's wife, Mu Tianjiao, was sitting in the pavilion with a frown on her face. Her father, Mu Bing, was constantly ridiculing Yu Qianqiu's shameless actions in the hallucination Immortal City. Mu Bing, relying on his identity as the External Affairs Grand Commander of Wu Xiong's Immortal Palace, could be said to frequently travel between the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and the Paradise Immortal Realm. He spent most of his time in the Paradise Immortal Realm, and most of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce's matters were handed over to his disciple, Nan Tianlong. Regarding this, he had nothing to worry about. With his current identity, even if he wasn't there to oversee the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, no one would dare to cause any trouble. There was no lack of people in the world who had been oppressed for a long time, but once they made a comeback, they instantly forgot everything. They enjoyed the feeling of getting whatever they wanted, and they even wantonly played with power. The world called these people petty people intoxicated by success. Mu Tianjiao held her forehead with one hand and placed her elbow on the stone table with a plate of fruits and ambrosia. I just don't understand why the Celestial Emperor would let that shameless person compose a song. It's simply the biggest joke in the world, father. Mu Tianjiao, who was deep in thought, suddenly raised her head and stopped Mu Bing from continuing. Her eyes were faintly filled with grief and indignation as she said, "Father, how dare you talk about the Celestial Emperor behind his back? Aren't you afraid of incurring his wrath and implicating me and Wu Xiong?" Mu Bing's expression changed, and he quickly looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he heaved a sigh of relief, but his heart was still pounding. He also knew that he had gotten a little carried away just now and spoke without thinking. However, the atmosphere in the pavilion became a little awkward. Mu Bing was now more or less a taboo towards this daughter of his. After all of his glory came from this daughter. In the end, it was Mu Tianjiao's expression that eased first. No matter how bad the other party was, he was still her father. She faintly sighed and said, "Father, please don't talk nonsense in the future. Just treat it as thinking about your daughter's happiness and leave some leeway in your mouth." Of course. Of course. It was just a slip of the tongue, that's all. Seeing that his daughter was no longer angry, Mu Bing quickly took the opportunity to explain, "I'm not talking about the Celestial Emperor. In fact, what I want to say is that the real culprit is that woman with the surname Liu. She must have said something to Immortal Empress Ji Wu. Otherwise, why would the Celestial Emperor let that Yu Qianqiu compose a song? Look at that Yu Qianqiu, he's a typical despicable person. Once he succeeds, he considers everyone beneath him and acts recklessly in the illusionary immortal city." Mu Tianjiao slowly stood up, looked at Mu Bing, and earnestly said, "Father, listen to me. After all, that Yu Qianqiu once did our Mu clan a favor. Back in the Divine Ruin Realm, if it wasn't for his help, would have already died there. Even if we don't put that aside, he doesn't have any deep hatred towards us, so why do you hate him so much?" "Just why? It's just that I can't stand his despicable behavior," Mu Bing weakly replied. In reality, it was because Yu Qianqiu made him lose face at Mu Tianjiao's wedding last time. His current temperament no longer allowed his subordinates to be rude to him, and Yu Qianqiu was now a typical servant in his eyes. Not to mention, Yu Qianqiu talked back to him in front of so many people, which seriously hurt his self-esteem. Recently, he had already prepared to use his powerful influence to teach Yu Qianqiu a good lesson and let Yu Qianqiu know what it meant to have a difference in status. Who would have thought that at this time, Yu Qianqiu would suddenly receive the decree of the Celestial Emperor? A decree personally issued by the Celestial Emperor. While Mu Bing felt a taboo, he was also a little jealous. As Wu Xiong's father-in-law, he had never received a decree from the Celestial Emperor, but a lowly servant actually received such an honor. Old resentment and current jealousy made his heart feel very uncomfortable. Whether he is a true gentleman or a despicable person, it has nothing to do with us. Mu Tianjiao suddenly paused as if she noticed something. Her bright eyes stared at Mu Bing's face, and she bit her lips. "Father, do you want to do something to him?" "Oh. What does father-in-law want to do to who?" A hearty laughter suddenly came from outside. The father and daughter turned their heads to look and saw Wu Xiong striding from the entrance of the garden with a smile on his face. Mu Bing also immediately smiled and quickly walked out of the pavilion. He looked at Wu Xiong and smiled. "The Grand Commander has returned." "Father-in-law." Wu Xiong very politely clasped his hands together, then reached out to grab Mu Tianjiao's hand. The two of them smiled at each other and walked into the pavilion. They sat on opposite sides of the stone table, giving off the feeling that they were close friends. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Bing, who followed them in, then looked at Mu Tianjiao and asked, "Madam, what did you say father-in-law wants to do? Why don't you tell me?" Chapter 993. Milord misheard. Mu Tianjiao shook her head helplessly. "I just don't think it's a good idea for father to stay here for too long. He should go back and put more effort into managing the Four Links Chamber of Commerce." Mu Bing's expression changed slightly when he heard this. A trace of resentment flashed across his eyes as he looked at his daughter. He felt that his daughter was unhappy because he had spoken too much about Yu Qianqiu and was chasing him away. For a moment, his heart was filled with jealousy and hatred for Yu Qianqiu. Oh. Wu Xiong made a noncommittal sound and glanced at Mu Bing. After interacting with his father-in-law for a period of time, he naturally had some understanding of his character. He faintly smiled and said, "Madam is worrying too much. Father-in-law will naturally arrange for someone to take care of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. There is no need to personally attend to this matter. If it really doesn't work, it's better to close down the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and open a bigger one in hallucinatory Immortal City. That way, it'll be closer. If father-in-law agrees, I'll greet the Great Bright Will Keeper of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and make things easier for you." "Good. Great Commander, this is a good idea." Mu Bing smiled happily. "No way." Mu Tianjiao shouted and suddenly stood up. She glared at Mu Bing and said sternly, "Father, have you forgotten that Mother died for the Four Links Chamber of Commerce? Are you really going to shut it down without any consideration for old ties?" Her entire face turned pale and her expression turned stern. Tears appeared at the corners of her eyes. She had always been strong, but it had been a long time since she had cried. In fact, there was something she didn't say. If it wasn't for the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, if it wasn't for her mother's painstaking efforts, why would she have to compromise and marry here? The Four Links Chamber of Commerce held too many memories of her deceased mother. It could be said that it was her emotional sustenance and the home of her heart. It could not be desecrated. The pavilion instantly quieted down. Mu Bing stood there awkwardly. Wu Xiong was also slightly stunned. Mu Tianjiao had always been a gentle and virtuous woman in front of him. This was the first time he had seen her so angry, and it was directed at her father. After Wu Xiong came back to his senses, his face was filled with relief. From this, it could be seen that his woman was a woman who valued friendship. He had not misjudged her. He stood up and walked to Mu Tianjiao's side. He grabbed her hand and comforted her. "Madam, don't be anxious. Since Madam is unwilling." As he said this, he looked at Mu Bing and said, "I think we should drop this matter. Father-in-law, you may as well focus on running the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. If there is anything you need, just let me know. I will do my best to help." Once the Four Links Chamber of Commerce had enough capital to expand, it wouldn't be too late to establish a branch in hallucinatory Immortal City. In fact, most sects and chambers of commerce did this. Sometimes, moving too fast might not be a good thing. What does father-in-law think? Since he said so, what else could Mu Bing say? He nodded awkwardly. He was too embarrassed to face his daughter here, so he squeezed out a smile and said, "I have something to do at home, so I'll go back first." Wu Xiong could feel Mu Bing's awkwardness and also felt a little embarrassed. After all, this was caused by him. He immediately stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "I'll see you off, father-in-law." Mu Tianjiao bit her lips as she watched the two men leave. Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. She never thought that something she held so firmly would be so disdainful in her father's eyes, as if he could abandon it at any time. Outside the External Affairs Grand Commander's residence, one could see the undulating mountains and the beautiful scenery. Wu Xiong, who had sent Mu Bing to the edge of the cliff, looked at the ashen-faced Mu Bing and said with a faint smile, "We're all family. Father-in-law, please don't take Madam's words to heart. You should know that she has no ill intentions towards you." Mu Bing's lips moved. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "It's not like that. The reason why Tianjiao is so angry is that Yu Qianqiu is to blame." Yu Qianqiu? Wu Xiong was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't figure out why this matter had something to do with Yu Qianqiu. He asked in surprise, "What does it have to do with Yu Qianqiu? She was fine before." It was only because she heard about Yu Qianqiu's shameless actions in the mystic immortal city that she became unhappy after I said a few words about Yu Qianqiu. That's why she lost her temper and wanted me, her father, to leave. Sigh. Mu Bing's eyes flickered. Wu Xiong's gaze instantly turned cold. He looked at Mu Bing and said indifferently, "What do you mean by this? Please don't misunderstand, Grand Commander. It's not what you think." Mu Bing waved his hand. He naturally wouldn't say that he wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. He sighed and explained, "Grand Commander, you might not know this, but when Yu Qianqiu first came to my Four Links Chamber of Commerce, he once pursued Tianjiao. I could tell at a glance that he wasn't a good person, so I firmly opposed him. Tianjiao also didn't take a liking to him, but I couldn't stand that guy's relentless pestering, so I might have been tempted. Fortunately, I noticed that something was wrong in time and drove that kid away. However, that kid couldn't forget my Tianjiao. Later, when the Grand Commander proposed to you, that kid was afraid of the Grand Commander's prestige and gave up. However, I never imagined that you would invite him on the day of your wedding. That's why I was so unhappy at the time and was a little rude to him." A suppressed murderous aura faintly circulated around Wu Xiong's body. How many men could tolerate another man coveting their beloved woman? His eyes flickered as he recalled Mu Tianjiao's first night. He felt that she hadn't done anything wrong to him, so his killing intent gradually retracted. Wu Xiong said indifferently, "Father-in-law, let's not mention the past. Otherwise, it won't be good for anyone. Not to mention, I don't want to pursue the past." Mu Bing was slightly surprised. He didn't think that Wu Xiong would be so magnanimous. However, when he recalled the killing intent Wu Xiong emitted earlier, he regained his confidence and said, "But I can't stand to see such an ambiguous matter. That kid's mouth is famous for being foul. I'm afraid that he will say something that will affect Tianjiao's reputation. As a parent, how can I tolerate such a thing happening? If there are any signs, I must find a way to put an end to it." Wu Xiong was startled and suspiciously asked, "You want to kill him?" Mu Bing firmly nodded. Wu Xiong immediately frowned and said, "Father-in-law, don't be reckless." He received the Immortal Emperor's decree to carry out his mission. If something happens to him, it's not something you or I can bear. But I heard that he wants to go to the Netherworld. Mu Bing gloomily looked at Wu Xiong and said word by word, "If something happens to him in the Netherworld, what does it have to do with you and me?" Wu Xiong looked at Mu Bing in surprise. He didn't expect Mu Bing to be so scheming. It seemed that he had underestimated Mu Bing. Wu Xiong originally wanted to persuade him to let go, but for some reason, he thought of the golden statues in his bedroom. It was a gift from Yu Qianqiu to congratulate him on his wedding. It had always been placed on Mu Tianjiao's dressing table with the words, "Forever and Earth," carved on it. Occasionally, he would see Mu Tianjiao staring at the golden statue in a daze. When he asked her why, she said that she hoped the two of them could be as eternal as the words carved on the statue. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but have a big question mark in his heart. Was there no other reason? For a moment, he felt a stabbing pain in his heart. Wu Xiong slowly said, "Father-in-law, you should give up. He has Tsangyan Aksayan by his side to protect him. Right now, Tsangyan Aksayan's cultivation has reached the mid-stage of the Immortal Emperor stage. He has also mastered the Heartless Palace's famous 3 swords as one sword drawing form. Not to mention father-in-law, even I am not his match." Although Wu Xiong's words were meant to dissuade him, Mu Bing's 7 apertures were miraculously smooth today. Their hearts were connected, and he could actually hear the softness in Wu Xiong's tone. Therefore, it could be said that sometimes, the power of hatred was extraordinary and could make people stronger. Mu Bing sneered and said, "Tsangyan Aksayan has a grudge with him for killing his grandson. I don't believe that Tsangyan Aksayan can protect him at all times without any complaints. Moreover, the Netherworld is chaotic. Anything can happen. If something happens to Yu Qianqiu, what can Sangyan Aksayan do? Hearing this, Wu Xiong was even more surprised. He couldn't help but size up Mu Bing again. How could a person with such schemes and methods manage the Four Links Chamber of Commerce to such a state? He originally wanted to test Mu Bing to see how capable he was. If he really had the ability, there was no harm in letting him try. If he didn't, then it was better to let him give up on the idea as soon as possible to avoid unnecessary trouble. However, he didn't expect Mu Bing to have some tricks up his sleeve. Wu Xiong still wanted to test him, so he slowly shook his head and said, even if Sangyan Aksayan has times of carelessness, that guy is also a capable person. I'm sure father-in-law has heard of the battle at the Life and Death Mound. I'm afraid ordinary people are not his match. The meaning behind his words was very clear. He was saying that Mu Bing was not Yu Qianqiu's match. It's fine that I'm not his match. Humans die for wealth and birds die for food. I'm sure there are many people who are his match. Mu Bing revealed an unfathomable smile, implicitly pointing out that he would use others to deal with Yu Qianqiu. Wu Xiong was afraid that if Mu Bing used force, he would be implicated. However, seeing that Mu Bing's thoughts were so clear that he wouldn't personally take action, Wu Xiong immediately felt relieved. He faintly smiled and said, it seems that father-in-law has made up his mind to go to the netherworld. However, the netherworld is chaotic, and this son-in-law is very worried about father-in-law's safety. Fortunately, when this son-in-law was handling the external affairs of the Immortal Palace, I had some friendly relations with some of the commanders of the netherworld's Dark Nether Army. If father-in-law encounters any trouble, there is no harm in asking for help from the Dark Nether Army. Tell them that you are my father-in-law. I'm sure they will give me some face. Mu Bing was overjoyed. His Four Links Chamber of Commerce had done business in the netherworld, so he naturally knew of the Dark Nether Army's illustrious reputation in the netherworld. With the Dark Nether Army's help, even if Yu Qianqiu was protected by Sangyan Aksayan, killing him would be a piece of cake. His confidence immediately soared as he cupped his hands and said, the great commander is very busy. It's rare for you to have a rest, so I won't disturb you any longer. Farewell. Chapter 994. The reason why he spent so much effort to nag in front of Wu Xiong was to get Wu Xiong to agree, but the most important reason was to gain Wu Xiong's support. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Wu Xiong had been the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace for so many years. It was impossible that he didn't have any power in the netherworld that he could borrow. If that was the case, then Wu Xiong wouldn't have held this position for so many years. It could also be described as incompetent. How could the Immortal Emperor let an incompetent person be the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace? Father-in-law, have a safe trip. I won't see you off. Wu Xiong cupped his fists and bowed slightly. He watched Mu Bing leave with a sneer on his face. With his intelligence, how could he not know that Mu Bing wanted to borrow his power? Since Mu Bing was in such a hurry, he would fulfill his wish. In any case, he only gave some verbal help and didn't show any evidence. As for the Onyx Army, if anything happened, he wouldn't be implicated. Moreover, judging from Mu Bing's words and actions just now, it was obvious that he was prepared. Perhaps he could really kill Yu Qianqiu. However, what Wu Xiong didn't know was that in the world of Yu Qianqiu's previous life, there was an idiom called armchair strategists. When one had nothing to do, one could boast and speak eloquently. However, when it came to real action, it was far from the case. If Mu Tianjiao had been present just now, she would have desperately tried to stop her father from doing that because she knew her father too well. How could she not know what her father was capable of? She never thought that her father could be a match for Yu Qianqiu, so she repeatedly advised him not to provoke Yu Qianqiu, but Wu Xiong wasn't a fool. He let Mu Bing do whatever he wanted because he had other intentions. The real reason was that Mu Bing had just said something about Mu Tianjiao and Yu Qianqiu. Regardless of how Yu Qianqiu was, Wu Xiong could see that this father-in-law of his could even insult the reputation of his only daughter, let alone him, his son-in-law. One could imagine what he wouldn't do in the future. At this rate, he would be implicated sooner or later. Then let him kill Yu Qianqiu. It would be best if they could kill Yu Qianqiu. If Mu Tianjiao really had a Yu Qianqiu in her heart, it would cut off Mu Tianjiao's yearning. For someone who loved her, it was a good thing. At the same time, Mu Tianjiao would surely hate her father because of this. Then, he could justifiably distance himself from Mu Bing, so as not to implicate himself in the future, and not to cause a rift between him and Mu Tianjiao. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. If Mu Bing failed to kill Yu Qianqiu and was killed by Yu Qianqiu instead, it would be a good thing for him. Now that Mu Bing was dead, this inconvenient burden was completely gone. Naturally, Mu Tianjiao would also completely cut off her thoughts of Yu Qianqiu. One could imagine how she would treat the person who killed her father. Similarly, it was killing two birds with one stone. In short, no matter who died, it would be a good thing for him, so Wu Xiong was naturally happy to do it. Poor Mu Bing. Little did he know that this little trick of his was not even worth mentioning in the eyes of some people. He was just digging a pit that would harm others and himself. Whether or not he could harm others was another matter, but he was definitely going to harm himself. On the rapidly flying shuttle, Yu Qianqiu sat at the back of the shuttle with his legs crossed. He leaned on the side of the shuttle with one hand supporting his head and looked at the scenery. It had already been 2 days. Qian Yun Xan, who was silently standing at the front of the flying shuttle, had his back facing him. The two of them had almost never communicated. Only Yu Qianqiu would tease him from time to time. Unfortunately, the other party simply ignored him. Drowsily, Yu Qianqiu felt the red light piercing his eyes. He opened his eyes slightly and saw that it was another rising sun. It was the 4th day since he left the psychedelic immortal city. In front of him, Qian Yun Xian's imposing figure blocked most of the piercing sunlight. Yu Qianqiu could not help but sigh at his foresight. Fortunately, he was not the one driving the flying shuttle. Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, the front end of the flying shuttle suddenly pressed down and slammed diagonally towards the ground. With the back of the shuttle tilted up, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the sides of the flying shuttle. He could see the ground getting closer and closer to him. He immediately cried out in alarm, "What are you trying to do, Qian Yun Xian?" Like a nail, Qian Yun Xian, who was standing firmly at the front of the flying shuttle, descended against the wind. He looked back and snorted coldly, "Cowardly rat." Then, the flying shuttle abruptly returned to normal and flew almost close to the ground. Finally, it slowly stopped in front of a magnificent palace built against a mountain. Bang! The moment the flying shuttle landed on the ground, Qian Yun Xian had already floated out and landed lightly on the steps of the palace's entrance. Yu Qianqiu dashed out as if he was running for his life. Then, he took the flying shuttle in his hand and checked it. After confirming that it was not damaged, he put it away. Just as he was about to scold Qian Yun Xian, he saw 2 golden-robed guards at the entrance of the palace. He immediately looked around and found that it was the entrance to the netherworld that everyone had mentioned. Only then did he know why Qian Yun Xian had stopped. "Damn it! Why didn't you say anything?" Yu Qianqiu cursed under his breath. In his heart, he was also amazed at the vastness of the immortal world. With Qian Yun Xian's cultivation, it took him more than 3 days to fly from the psychedelic immortal city to here. If it was him, who knew how many days it would take to fly? This was the difference in cultivation. After looking around, he swayed towards a small hill on the side. Just as he reached the top of the hill, he heard Qian Yun Xian's voice behind him. "Where are you going now?" "To pee." Yu Qianqiu turned back and roared. Just as he lifted his robe, he found that there was a call in front of him that seemed to be more hidden. He turned back and roared again, "Don't peek." Qian Yun Xian's face immediately darkened. He had no intention of peeking at all. After turning into the call, Yu Qianqiu looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he took out a silver ball and pressed it into the mountain wall. This was mainly to shorten the time it would take to reach the entrance to the netherworld. Then, he lifted up his long robe and fired a shot to deceive others. After tying his belt, he swayed back to the entrance of the palace. Qian Yun Xian looked at him coldly and sneered, "Why don't you take a dump again?" Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly, "This thing doesn't care about travel together. The place I just went is very hidden. If you want to take me there, I'll wait for you." Qian Yun Xian's lips moved, but he forcefully held back and did not say anything. He realized that he was not a match for Yu Qianqiu in a quarrel. The main thing was that he was not as shameless as Yu Qianqiu. The two golden-robed guards looked at each other. They had never heard anyone talk about taking a dump here. It was simply unbearable. One of them immediately shouted, "This is the entrance to the netherworld. Those with the token can enter. Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. Leave quickly." Yu Qianqiu immediately took out his netherworld passage token and waved it in front of the ash cloud messenger in a threatening manner. It was as if he was saying, "Did you hear that? Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. I can make a ruckus with the token. If you don't have it, you better shut up obediently." Qian Yun Xian's face darkened again. Although their heartless palace had the netherworld token, it had always been used by groups. They would rarely give it to a single person, unless there was something important. He immediately said in a deep voice, "If you want to go in alone without me, this old man will be more than happy to do so." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and snorted coldly, as if saying, "In your dreams." Then, he walked up to the guards and handed over the token for them to check. After confirming it, the guards let the two of them in. The two of them walked in one after the other. There was nothing in the hall. The four walls were chiseled with knives and axes, and there was only a long tunnel. The tunnel was abnormally dark, and it was frighteningly quiet. Only the sound of their footsteps could be heard. At the end of the tunnel, there was a ball of black light spinning tirelessly. It was unknown how many years it had been spinning here. "You go in first." Yu Qianqiu moved to the side. After all, he had never been to the netherworld, so he was more or less unsure. Qian Yun Xian snorted coldly and disappeared into the spinning black light in a flash. Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a long time, but he finally plucked up his courage and jumped in. The moment he entered the spinning black light, colorful flowing lights appeared in front of him. An unknown gravitational force sucked him in, and when there was a flash of light, he was spat out. The sky was dark, and there was no light from the sun or the moon. It was like the moment when twilight was about to turn into night. This was the first thing that Yu Qianqiu felt when he landed and saw this world. However, before he could see anything else, Yu Qianqiu. Qian Yun Xian's angry roar rang out. Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw over a dozen black-armored, knife-wielding soldiers surrounding Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian was looking at Yu Qianqiu as if he wanted to swallow him alive. Damn it! Could it be that the netherworld was in such chaos? It really lived up to its reputation. Before he could figure out what was going on, a stocky armored general appeared in front of him. He held a large blade that looked like a green dragon crescent moon blade and shouted, "Incomer, show me your token of passage to the netherworld." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the besieged Sangyan Xian and cautiously took out his netherworld passage medallion. While the other side was checking the medallion, Yu Qianqiu pointed at Sangyan Xian and carefully asked, "General, what crime did he commit?" After the armored general verified that there was nothing wrong with the token, he returned it to Yu Qianqiu and asked, "He's with you?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered. He could not figure out the situation, nor did he know what kind of crime Qian Yunxian had committed. If he was with him, would he be implicated? As soon as he hesitated, Qian Yunxian panicked and roared, "Yu Qianqiu, what do you think you're doing?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation around him. There weren't many people here, so he guessed that these people might not be a match for Qian Yunxian. He replied weakly, "He's with me." "Is there a problem?" The armored general immediately rolled his eyes and snapped, "No problem, all of you scram." The dozen or so saber-wielding soldiers surrounding Greycloud Xian also flashed back. Yu Qianqiu walked up to Greycloud Xian, who was glaring at him with fire in his eyes, and asked suspiciously, "What did you do? You made such a big fuss and almost implicated me. Do you really not know?" Qian Yunxian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "I just came in. How would I know what you did?" Yu Qianqiu was confused. He did not know that after he let Qian Yunxian come in first, he had been too careful and hesitated a little too long at the entrance to the immortal world. As soon as Qian Yunxian arrived in the netherworld, the guards naturally wanted to see his netherworld token, but he did not have it. He could only say that the token was with the person behind him and would come in soon. But what made him panic was that after waiting for a long time, Yu Qianqiu still didn't come in. He immediately suspected that he had been tricked by Yu Qianqiu. The guards waited for a long time and did not see anyone come in. They naturally suspected that he was a trespasser and immediately surrounded him. Fortunately, the guards realized that Qian Yunxian's cultivation was very high. It was probably not something they could handle, so they didn't make a move. Otherwise, they would have captured Qian Yunxian first. It was also at this critical moment that the late Yu Qianqiu finally came. This was what happened. Qian Yunxian saw that he did not look like he was lying. After a bit of analysis, he felt that he was not lying. If he really wanted to harm him, he would not have come in. Even if he came in, he could have denied not knowing him and caused a conflict between him and the guards. He paused and said, "This should be your first time in the netherworld, right?" Yu Qianqiu's brain was still somewhat good. After hearing his question and looking at the guards at the entrance, he pondered for a bit and understood what was going on. However, he did not regret not taking the opportunity to trick Qian Yunxian, because it was useless now. With Qian Yunxian's ability, if he was forced into a corner, he could easily escape back to the immortal world. The exit was right in front of him, and the guards here should not be able to stop him. Yu Qianqiu replied with a non-committal "n", indicating that it was indeed his first time in the netherworld. Then, he began to look around. A huge stone tablet at the side, diagonally facing the exit of the netherworld, attracted his attention. Anyone who entered the netherworld from the immortal world would probably be able to see the inscription on it. The vast netherworld, a world of its own. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. The ultimate place, the netherworld. 20 large, blood-red words were forcefully engraved on the huge black stone tablet. The words exuded an ancient aura, making people have the urge to kneel and worship them. Yu Qianqiu's gaze turned towards the endless darkness. This place was not completely dark. There was a hint of a green haze to it. It felt like there was some light, but he couldn't tell where the light was. It was like the moment when dusk turned to night, or when the night was about to break. Everything was hazy. The guards at the entrance of the netherworld looked at the two fellows who were unwilling to leave. From time to time, they would look at their leader, who was the guy who had just checked Yu Qianqiu's pass. Logically speaking, at this time, the leader should have shouted, "Since you have the pass, you are not allowed to stay. Leave immediately." But the strange thing was that the leader looked to the side with his hands behind his back, as if he had not seen anything. Chapter 995. This was called smart people doing smart things, or being perceptive. At first, the armored general only realized that he couldn't see through Zhu Qianqiu's cultivation. Later, when Yu Qianqiu came in, he didn't pay much attention at first, because Yu Qianqiu's weak response made him look down on him a little. However, when he realized that he also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he was shocked. Why did two immortal emperor-level experts come from the immortal world all of a sudden? The underworld's cultivation was divided into 4 levels: Underworld Knight, Underworld Sage, Underworld Venerable, and Underworld Emperor, corresponding to the immortal world's minor immortal, exalted immortal, great immortal, and immortal emperor levels. The armored general's cultivation wasn't low, otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to guard the underworld's entrance. After all, he was a late-stage underworld venerable, equivalent to a late-stage great immortal. However, since he couldn't see through their cultivation, these two were at least early-stage immortal emperor experts. The reason he was shocked wasn't because he was afraid of Zhu Qianqiu Xian, but from Zhu Qianqiu Xian's actions at the beginning, he was clearly wary of the underworld. However, the guy who came later was different. His cultivation was so high, why did he pretend to be weak? Based on his many years of experience, people who pretended to be weak were often the easiest to ignore, and often the scariest. So, seeing that the two didn't leave, he didn't dare to say anything. If he angered them, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Anyway, they came in with a token and didn't break any rules. So, he turned around and pretended he didn't see anything, displaying the style of an old fox who was good to everyone. So this is the underworld. Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. It was more or less different from what he imagined. He looked around and didn't know where to go. What do you want to do in the underworld? Zhu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and thought that it was a good idea to keep an expert by his side. After all, he knew nothing about the netherworld and was not in a hurry to get rid of him. He shook his head and sighed, I dare not disobey the Celestial Emperor's decree. Oh right, your heartless palace should have people doing business in the netherworld, right? Yes. Seeing that his tone had suddenly become gentle, Tsangin Xian recalled Meihi's words before he came, and immediately became vigilant. What do you want? We can't run around aimlessly. Naturally, he had to gather some information first. As the chief high priest of Heartless Palace, you should be able to contact them, right? Yu Qianqiu asked seriously. In fact, his purpose was very simple. He came here to find Bai Changchun. To be more precise, he wanted to know whether Bai Changchun was dead or alive. Otherwise, he would feel very uncomfortable worrying about him every day. It was said that Bai Changchun had fought with the Emperor of the Underworld and fled into the boundless and mysterious land of darkness after his defeat. They had to find out which direction Bai Changchun had fled to. Otherwise, how would they find him? The guards at the entrance of the underworld shivered slightly, especially the armored general. He thought to himself, no wonder both of their cultivations are so high. One is here on the decree of the immortal emperor, the other is the chief high priest of the number 1 sect in the immortal world. But why did they come to the underworld? What do you want to find out? Tsangin Xian asked suspiciously. Nothing much. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. I just want to know the general situation of the underworld so that I can travel around and gain experience. Only with enough experience can I compose a good song. He wanted to say that he wanted to find Bai Changchun, but he couldn't say it out loud. First of all, it would scare Tsangin Xian, and this was the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld. If he revealed it, wouldn't he be immediately targeted by the Emperor of the Underworld? Tsangin Xian pondered for a moment and didn't want to say anything. However, this was the underworld after all, and it was very chaotic with various hegemons. This was the brat's first time here, so he didn't know anything. If he ran around with this brat and ended up in the lair of some powerful expert, then he would also be out of luck. After a moment of hesitation, he slowly said, "Follow me." Then, he took out his own flying shuttle and flashed onto it. Yu Qianqiu immediately flashed onto it as well. This time, there was no need to waste his breath on scheming. Sungyin Aksayan took the initiative to act as a guide and pilot the flying shuttle. Although he wasn't familiar with the underworld, he had been here before. Compared to a rookie like Yu Qianqiu, he was much more familiar with it. He was mainly concerned about his own safety. He was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would take him to some lair. The flying shuttle sped northwest in the darkness. In fact, even Yu Qianqiu couldn't tell if they were going northwest or not. There were no sun, moon, or stars here, so there was no way to tell which direction they were going. However, when they exited the entrance of the underworld, they were facing forward. Then, according to the common sense of up north, down south, left, west, right, east, who knew which direction they were flying in? Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the people of the underworld didn't have any direction at all. Although the speed of the flying shuttle was very fast, it was obviously much slower than when they were flying in the immortal world. Sungyin Aksayan stood at the front, maintaining a high degree of vigilance. His robe fluttered in the night, making him look extraordinary. In particular, his hands were hidden in his sleeves. Yu Qianqiu didn't doubt that if they encountered any unexpected situation, the hands hidden in his sleeves could pull out the Heartless Palace's three swords drawing technique at any time. It would definitely be earth-shattering. Yu Qianqiu kept looking around. The scenery of the underworld was not just a little worse than the immortal world. The main reason was that there was no scenery to see. Everywhere was dim and gloomy. From time to time, he would see streams of light dancing in the air. He didn't know what they were, but it was slightly mysterious. Occasionally, he could see the shadow of a huge black shadow flashing by. Judging by the shape, it should be the mountains of the underworld. I say, High Consecrator Tsangyun, where are you taking me? Yu Qianqiu had lost count of the number of times he had asked this question. The annoyed ash-gray cloud Exian finally spat out 4 words, Twilight City. Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He felt that he had heard this name before, but he couldn't remember when he heard it. Normally, if he heard such a rare name in the immortal world, he would definitely remember who said it. Could it be an impression from his previous life? In his previous life, the underworld, which was the netherworld, had Twilight City. What kind of place is Twilight City? Is it a city? Why is it called Twilight City? He asked a lot of questions in one breath. Sungyin Aksayan understood that if he didn't answer, this guy would continue to be annoyed. He looked around vigilantly and casually explained, no one knows why it is called Twilight City, at least I don't know. Maybe someone knew in the past. Anyway, this name has existed for a long time. It is a city, and no one knows when it has existed. In short, many things in the underworld are too old to be judged by common sense. It is now a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld. It is said that when the demon world was not sealed, the cultivators of the 3 realms would trade here. A place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He searched his mind but had no memory of it. He couldn't help but wonder, since it is a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld, why have I never heard of it in the immortal world? Sungyin Aksayan sneered, the rules of the underworld do not allow the people of the underworld to trade with the people of the immortal world. However, there are some things that both sides need, so the underworld palace turns a blind eye to it. However, no one would be stupid enough to openly provoke the underworld palace. If not stupid, then what is? What's more, Twilight City is not a place that ordinary immortal world sects can reach. It's not surprising that you don't know about it. If you don't ask, no one will talk about it. Sure enough, his foundation was shallow. He didn't know how many things he didn't know. Yu Qianqiu fell into silence for a while. Obviously, ordinary immortal world sects couldn't reach it because they would encounter many dangers on the way. With the strength of those small sects, it was indeed difficult to reach it safely. After a pause, he asked, with your current speed, how long will it take to reach Twilight City from the entrance to the underworld? If it goes well. At least half a month. Sangyin Aksayan said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu immediately let out a cold breath. The territory of the underworld was really wide. With Sangyin Aksayan's speed, what kind of concept would it take half a month to fly? And this was under the condition that everything went well. What if it didn't? Just as he thought that things weren't going well, things were about to happen, the shuttle suddenly came to an abrupt stop, the powerful inertia throwing him out. Like a bolt of lightning, Ashiro Yun Aksayan grabbed his ankle, pulled him back, and threw him back into the cabin. Yu Qianqiu was immediately scared and shouted, "What do you want now?" "Shut up!" Sangyin Aksayan shouted in a low voice, and his eyes quickly swept around. Yu Qianqiu immediately found that there was something wrong with his expression. He also looked around and found that there was a faint gray fog in the darkness. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it. He immediately asked carefully, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong? We have been in this gray fog for several hours, and we are trapped by the formation." Sangyin Aksayan pointed to the shadowy peaks around them, but when he said this, his expression was unusually calm, and his eyes were full of strong confidence. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu felt a lot more relieved. He suddenly said indifferently to the void, "I don't know which friend is playing a joke here. This Sangyin Aksayan has accidentally disturbed this place. I hope this friend will be magnanimous and let us go. This Sangyin Aksayan will be very grateful." Yu Qianqiu was not afraid. He could go back at any time. While he was looking around curiously, he suddenly heard laughter coming from all directions. He couldn't tell whether it was a man's voice or a woman's voice. It seemed to be far and close, and from time to time, it gave people the feeling that it was lying next to your ear and laughing. It was very strange. Yu Qianqiu hated people who played tricks in front of him the most. He immediately shouted, "Which old bastard dares to play tricks in front of Grandpa? Do you want to die?" Chapter 996. Sangyin Aksayan was speechless. He tilted his head and looked over. You didn't even know whether the enemy was strong or weak, and you already started scolding him. If it was an expert that you couldn't afford to offend, you wouldn't even have the chance to regret it. However, Yu Qianqiu politely followed the routine and ignored him. Yu Qianqiu's strange laughter was suddenly cut off. He couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu again, guessing that he had been scolded to stop. Sangyin Aksayan couldn't help but feel a little depressed. It seemed that this guy was always arrogant and didn't fear anyone, not just him. But if he didn't restrain himself in the netherworld, he would be implicated and killed by this guy sooner or later. "Ignorant junior, how dare you speak such arrogant words? In a moment, this old man will definitely eat you up until not even your bones are left." The ethereal and traceless voice once again sounded from all directions. It seemed to be near yet far, and sometimes it seemed to be right beside one's ear. It's useless to talk nicely to this kind of pretentious person. He's just asking for a scolding. Look, he's exposed. What an old guy. Yu Qianqiu looked around and turned to ask Sangyin Aksayan, "With your ability, it shouldn't be a problem to take care of him, right? I didn't even see him, how would I know if there's a problem?" Sangyin Aksayan's face twitched. This kind of person was really not on the same level as him. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony. He took a step forward, stepped on the side of the ship, and waved his hand at the night sky, shouting, "Old bastard, I'm warning you, the person next to me is a top expert, Sangyin Aksayan, the chief consecrator of the #1 sect in the celestial world, Heartless Palace. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give way, or he won't be polite to you. He had never seen such a shameless person. Just as Greycloud Exaen glared at him, the faintly discernible voice laughed and said, "I've heard of the Celestial Realm's Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing, but I've never heard of this or that. But even if the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, is here, so what? This is the Netherworld, it's not the place for people from the celestial world to be arrogant." Yu Qianqiu immediately pointed around and shook his head at Sangyin Exaen. "This old thing is obviously looking down on you." In fact, Qingyan Exaen had already used his perception to scan the surroundings during this period of time. His eyes flickered as he looked around and said, "I have no enmity with Sir and do not wish to have any conflict with Sir. I hope that Sir will stop here, all right?" Yu Qianqiu's spirit was instantly lifted. He could hear a hint of an ultimatum in his words. It seemed like the show was about to start. "Stop." The faintly discernible voice giggled. "What a joke. I haven't even made a move. You're the ones who barged into my Mirage, Mr. Ray. You can't even break out of my Mirage, Mr. Ray, so what qualifications do you have to fight with me?" Sangyin Exaen snorted coldly. Just like Yu Qianqiu, he stepped on the railing with one foot, stared down at Ji Hao, and said in a bland tone, "You are hiding in the vast Styx River, so you must be a member of the Styx River water kind. Do you think that I can't do anything to you just because you're hiding in the Netherworld River?" Styx River. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He quickly craned his neck to look around. He could vaguely see an outline that was as wide as a black belt extending to both ends of the land. He couldn't see the end of it either. This should be the Styx River that Sangyin Exaen had mentioned. The other party paused. Obviously, he was surprised that Sangyin Exaen could discover his hiding place. Then, he giggled and said, "I won't argue with you. We'll talk after you break my Mirage, Mr. Ray. If you can't, just wait for death. Child's play. I'll naturally break it after I kill you." Sangyin Exaen stared down without turning his head. He said to Yu Qianqiu, "Wait for me here. We'll continue our journey after I get rid of this demon." His words were filled with great confidence in his own strength. "Yes, yes, yes." Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly. "Do whatever you want. I can take care of myself." Sangyin Exaen stomped his feet lightly and floated in the air. His cold gaze swept across the land below. With a swoosh, he turned into a blue stream of light and charged down. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly controlled the flying shuttle. He knelt at the bow of the ship and stuck out his butt to look at the commotion below. Just as the stream of light was about to collide with the wide river below, Sangyin Exaen's shout was suddenly heard. "Absolute heaven!" Yu Qianqiu suddenly recalled that Wei Chuanqiu had told him that day. The Passionless Palace's sword-drawing technique had a total of 5 forms. The first form was called Absolute Heaven, the second form was called Absolute Earth, the third form was called Heartless, the fourth form was called 2 Swords as One, and the fifth form was called 3 Swords as One. Sangyin Exaen had already mastered all 5 forms of the sword-drawing technique. Then, this Absolute Heaven should be the first form of the Passionless Palace's sword-drawing technique. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, a dazzling light suddenly illuminated the world. Although it was shrouded in a thin layer of fog, the surrounding situation could be seen clearly in an instant. The surging waves of the river reflected the dazzling light. In the sky, the sword ray that was like a heavenly dragon clashed violently with the reflection in the river. Boom! The tranquil night was broken, a huge wave instantly spread out from the wide Netherworld River, rumbling and surging in all directions. The center of the wave exploded into a splash of white water that was hundreds of meters high, charging straight at the flying shuttle above. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He used the water art and slapped out with his palm. The violent wave of water immediately scattered in all directions, brushing past the flying shuttle and shooting even higher. Water was soft and could dissipate force. To be able to cause such a high wave, it was clear how powerful Tsangyin Xian's attack was. Then, Yu Qianqiu saw with his own eyes that the Netherworld River, which was nearly a kilometer wide, was almost cut off by Tsangyin Xian's sword. He could see the riverbed. Meanwhile, Tsangyin Xian's sword-drawing technique did not dissipate. It directly struck a huge mound of soil on the riverbed. Ah! A scream rang out. The Netherworld River, which had been cut off, was instantly submerged together with Tsangyin Xian. The dazzling light that was like a flash in the pan suddenly disappeared. There was a throbbing in the surrounding air. Yu Qianqiu looked around vigilantly. He saw that a large area of hazy gray fog was sizzling away and gathering in the Netherworld River below. It was as if there was a huge range hood installed in the Netherworld River. It seemed like the mirage mist array had been broken. Yu Qianqiu immediately clicked his tongue. He thought to himself that Tsangyin Xian was indeed an immortal emperor-level expert. He had solved the problem with a single attack. It was clean and efficient. He wondered if Tsangyin Xian had killed that demon. As he was pondering, he suddenly heard a soft, dong sound behind him. He turned around and saw a large hand quickly grabbing his neck. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He slapped back with his hand almost without hesitation. A group of purple meteors burst out and smashed the hand that was grabbing him into pieces on the spot. Ah! The person screamed, but he reacted quickly. The moment his hand was crippled, he teleported hundreds of meters away before the group of flying swords could hit him. He turned around and ran. At that moment, a blue stream of light rushed out of the water with a boom. It shot out diagonally and cut off the person's escape route. It was Tsangyin Xian. A thick gray fog suddenly burst out from the figure's body to obscure the eyes and ears of others. In an instant, it wrapped around Gray Cloud Xian and shot out from the gray fog, rushing towards the Netherworld River below. As a bystander, Yu Qianqiu saw everything clearly. He immediately roared angrily, "B****, you dare to sneak attack me? Don't run." The group of purple swords in the air chased after him. He didn't care about anything else. He threw down the flying shuttle and teleported to chase after him. It was more important to kill him first. He didn't know what kind of magical power that the thick gray fog had. It actually trapped Tsangyin Xian for a while. After Tsangyin Xian rushed out of the fog, he happened to see the flying shuttle in the air lose its momentum and fall. He waved his hand and kept the flying shuttle. His gaze suddenly looked down. Just as the person who was fleeing in panic entered the water, close to 100 purple flying swords shot into the water like cannons. Yu Qianqiu, who was in hot pursuit, shouted angrily, trying to run. As he gave chase, he fiercely sent out a palm strike. The surging Netherworld River below instantly became sparkling and translucent. Tsangyin Xian's pupils shrank. He couldn't help but let out a cold breath. Although he had heard of the legend of Yu Qianqiu freezing the life and death mound in illusory immortal city, it wasn't as shocking as seeing it with his own eyes. A river that was close to 1,000 meters wide was instantly frozen. "Great Immortal, please spare me. Great Immortal, please spare me. I know my mistake, I know my mistake." A sorrowful voice came from the glacier below. Yu Qianqiu landed on the ice. He looked down with a sinister gaze. He seemed to be considering whether or not to kill. Tsangyin Xian kept the sword in his hand and landed on the ice. He was speechless when he saw the crystal-clear situation below. The frozen person was surrounded by hundreds of purple flying swords. Some of the flying swords even stabbed into his body. If Yu Qianqiu hadn't stopped in time, that person would have been stabbed into a hedgehog. That person was actually depressed. He couldn't understand why the river suddenly froze. He was surrounded by hundreds of flying swords in just a short while. If it was an ordinary flying sword, he would not be afraid. However, he had already experienced these flying swords. Not only were they incomparably sharp, they seemed to be his natural nemesis. His cultivation was like nothing in front of them. Once he got close, he could feel a strong sense of suppression. Without a doubt, they could easily beat him into a cork. He had no way of blocking them. This person is a river clam that has cultivated successfully. His cultivation has reached the early stage of Underworld Venerable. It is equivalent to the early stage Great Immortal in the immortal world. Sangyan Aksayan said indifferently. He had clearly seen the person's true form in the river. River clam. Early stage Underworld Venerable? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He seemed to understand something. He took a few steps forward. The ice under his feet melted and he quickly sank down. He landed in front of the pitiful man who was trapped and looked him up and down. The man was dark and skinny, and he didn't look old. His eyes were filled with fear and his pupils were spinning around. Other than the wounds caused by his flying swords, there were a few long bloody wounds. It was obvious that he was injured by Tsangyan Aksayan. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He shook his sleeve and a small green bead appeared in his hand. He held it between two fingers and sent it to the person's mouth. He shouted, "Swallow it if you don't want to die." Chapter 997. It was already scary enough to be stabbed by so many flying swords. Now, he was forced to eat this strange thing. The person looked at the thing beside his mouth and said in fear, What is this?" He could already feel that this pearl had an aura similar to that of the flying swords that could suppress him. If he ate it, he would die. "You don't look like you want to eat it." Yu Qianqiu asked sinisterly. Close to 100 purple flying swords suddenly moved closer by an inch. The person immediately cried out, "I'll eat it, I'll eat it." His mouth was wide open. Yu Qianqiu flicked his finger, and the green pearl directly burrowed into the person's throat. The person coughed and looked at him in fear. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "That's right. Don't ever think about forcing him out, and don't ever think about escaping. Otherwise, you will end up very badly." That bead was not something else, it was condensed from green fire. When Yu Qianqiu heard that the person was so weak despite having an early-stage netherworld venerable cultivation, he knew that part of the reason was that he had already been injured by Grey Cloud Axion, but the most important reason was that his own fire arts could restrain the person. Yu Qianqiu recalled the time when he used fire arts to suppress Ghost General Meng Yan in the Demon Ghost region. The extreme yang flames were the bane of ghosts and spirits, and they were very useful in the netherworld. Thus, he had a sudden idea and condensed a green fire pearl for the person to swallow. If the person was forced out by force, or escaped the range of the green fire pearl, then the green fire pearl would immediately explode into a fierce green fire in the person's stomach. It would be strange if this ghost-type netherworld monster did not turn into ashes. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed out of the glacier after he had placed a restriction on the other party. Nearly 100 purple flying swords broke through the ice and flew into his sleeves with a whoosh. Grey Cloud Axion stared at his sleeves for a while, then looked at the person in the ice cave and said, "What did you give him to eat? In any case, he's not a good person. If he dares to disobey, I'll make sure he doesn't even have the chance to cry." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. The people in the ice cave shuddered at his words. Suddenly, a sinister laugh was heard from above. "Stop playing dead down there. Get up here." Bang, bang. Whaw. Rumble. Strange sounds came from both ends of the Netherworld River. After the entire glacier trembled, it was finally unable to withstand the scouring of the Netherworld River. It broke away from the solidification of the two sides of the river and slowly floated downstream along with the Netherworld River. The glacier beneath their feet shook violently from time to time. Dense spiderweb-like cracks had already begun to appear. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yunxin stood firmly on top of it, watching the person climbing out of the hole in the ice. After that person carefully looked at the two of them, he realized that he couldn't see through their cultivation at all. It was obvious that they were both stronger than him. His entire face instantly turned bitter, and he silently cursed his bad luck. Previously, when he saw the speed of the two flying shuttles, he estimated that their cultivation should be similar to his. In addition, he saw that they were people from the celestial world and not locals, so he didn't take them seriously. In the end, he suffered such a disaster. Little did he know that Song Yunxin was being careful and didn't dare to fly too fast, but there were people who came to seek death. Thou art of the Netherworld River's water tribe. We are flying in the air and have nothing to do with you. Why are you waiting for an opportunity to harm us? Song Yunxin shouted coldly. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at him. He realized that once this fellow came to the Netherworld, the way he spoke immediately changed. In the celestial world, he was very unscrupulous and arrogant. Here, no matter how ruthless he was, he always had a bit of a diplomatic tone. He was very similar to those people in his previous life, which made people a little uncomfortable. The person said weakly, I really didn't mean to target you. Before you came, I had already set up the Mirage Mist formation, but you just happened to barge in. Stop your F***king nonsense. The Netherworld isn't your home. Do you think it's reasonable for you to rob us here? That. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, River Clam Demon, what's your name? From their tone, one could tell that the younger one was obviously not a kind person. The person immediately nodded and said, this lowly one is Xinyu. Xinyu. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment. He realized that it was indeed a monster from the Netherworld River. Even its name was strange. Xinyu, tell me honestly. Why did you set up a formation here to harm people? River Clam Xinyu replied weakly, there are often people from the celestial world coming and going on this road. This lowly one is sick of the food in the Netherworld River, so I wanted to change my taste. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xian's expressions twitched. They didn't expect to almost become food in someone else's mouth. At this moment, the glacier under their feet shook violently again, and the sound of ice cracking could be heard. The entire glacier continued to split into smaller pieces, and the ice beneath their feet flowed even faster. Were we trapped by his Mirage Mist formation for a few hours? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked Grey Cloud Xian. The latter nodded in confusion. Yu Qianqiu squinted at Xinyu and sneered. A few hours of delay, and now there's a burden. Hee. Xinyu, I can't vent my anger. Tell me, why should I spare your life? Xinyu panicked. He swallowed the bead but didn't dare to run. He waved his hand and denied, not a burden, not a burden. May I ask if the two of you are going to Twilight City? The two looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, how do you know? This lowly one only deduced it from the direction the two of you were flying in. As long as the two of you spare my life, I'm willing to take the two of you on the river. I won't be slower than the two of you in the air, Xinyu begged. He didn't doubt that Yu Qianqiu would kill him if he was unhappy. This Netherworld River connects to Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu confirmed with Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian nodded. Twilight City is indeed not far from the Netherworld River. Then hurry up. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted. Xinyu had a green fire bead in his body, so he wasn't afraid of him playing tricks. Zhou Yu nodded in delight. He twisted his limbs and the wounds on his body healed at a visible rate. Even his palm, which had been blasted apart by the flying sword, had recovered to its original state. However, his dark face appeared somewhat pale. Clearly, this method of healing consumed a lot of his cultivation. Suddenly, Shinyu quickly retreated more than 10 meters on the glacier and crawled on the cracked ice. His body flickered, and a huge river clam appeared on the ice. It was dark brown and oval in shape. It was more than 10 meters long and 4 to 5 meters thick. It was very rare. Grey Cloud Axayan was a knowledgeable person, but he couldn't help but exclaim, "For a river clam to grow to your size, it must have cultivated for a long time." Yu Qianqiu was also amazed. He was a cultivator, so he knew that it was extremely difficult for this kind of shellfish to cultivate. It was many times more difficult than other animals. It was a miracle that it could grow to such a large size. Shinyu's voice came from the huge river clam. He smiled bitterly and said, "I lived for 500,000 years in ignorance. Later on, my spiritual wisdom appeared, and after 500,000 years, I was lucky enough to find the knack of cultivation. After 200,000 years of cultivation, I have achieved what I have today. Great immortals, please get on my back. I will take you to Twilight City." Yu Qianqiu and Sungin Axayan were shocked when they heard this. They looked at each other and then flashed to the back of the giant clam. "Great immortals, sit tight." As soon as he finished his words, the oval-shaped giant clam started to move on its own at an extremely fast speed. With a swish, it slipped away on the ice surface. In the blink of an eye, it slid out of the ice and plunged into the cold Styx River. Its back was less than 1 meter above the water, but the surface area was more than 3 meters square. It was enough for Grey Cloud Axayan and Yu Qianqiu to stand or sit. Shinyu wasn't bragging. His speed in the water was indeed not slower than Grey Cloud Axayan's flying shuttle. The two stood on his back and felt the coolness of the Styx River. They looked at the scenery of the underworld and felt refreshed. The strangest thing was that when such a huge river clam moved through the water, not a single splash was made. Not even the slightest sound could be heard. It could be seen that this old and experienced fellow in the Netherworld River was really good at manipulating water. Grey Cloud Axayan suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. With his vast experience, he must have taken advantage of Yu Qianqiu and experienced the feeling of swimming in the Styx River for the first time. If he told the people of the Heartless Palace about this experience, they would definitely be fascinated. Everyone had vanity. It depended on which aspect it was. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that Grey Cloud Axayan had such vain thoughts. After he recovered from his shock, he looked around and sat on the slightly protruding shell in the middle. He patted the shell and said, "Shinyu, from what you said earlier, you've lived for at least 1.2 million years. I've lived for so many years in vain. I'm not as powerful as the two great immortals." Shinyu was humbled to show that he had lived for so many years. Legend has it that the Styx River flowed through the entire underworld since ancient times. There are even rumors that say without the Styx River, there would be no underworld. There are even more exaggerated sayings that say without the Styx River, there would be no living beings in the three realms. Although these are all exaggerations, I think only such an ancient river can have living beings like you who have lived for millions of years. Grey Cloud Axayan sighed as he faced the cool breeze of the Styx River. Then, he looked at his feet and said, "You can live for 500,000 years before your intelligence is developed. I think you must be an ancient mutant, similar to the fierce beasts in our celestial world. Otherwise, normal living beings can't live for so many years before their cultivation is complete." Hee hee. Great immortal, you flatter me. It would be great if I was an ancient mutant. Shinyu smiled bitterly and said, "Ancient mutants that can live as long as me can more or less have a place in the Styx River with their talents and abilities. They won't wander around the Styx River like me." Chapter 998. You're not. Sungin Aksayan was taken aback at first, then exclaimed, "How is this possible? You haven't developed spiritual intelligence and haven't cultivated yet. How can you live for 500,000 years?" Yu Qiancho was also stunned. Although his cultivation level wasn't high in the immortal world, he still knew some basic knowledge about cultivation. If it wasn't a prehistoric ferocious beast, or an extremely special kind of ferocious beast that had accidentally devoured a now extinct heavenly treasure in a distant era, it was possible for it to live for hundreds of thousands of years with its strong physical body before it developed spiritual intelligence. Even so, it was still rare to hear of someone living over 500,000 years. Even those immortals had never heard of anyone who could live for more than 1,000,000 years. Of course, this wasn't to say that immortality was fake. It was just that the rise and fall of immortals were unpredictable. No one could predict what accidents would happen. It was as if there was some mysterious power that didn't allow a person to live forever. No matter how healthy one's physical body was, there would always be all kinds of calamities that forcefully took away one's life. The most common was fighting and killing for the sake of profit or grudges. This was the culprit that took away an immortal's life. Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who controlled the immortal world, and Underworld Emperor Bai Qi, who controlled the underworld, didn't live for more than 500,000 years. It should be known that 500,000 years was definitely not a small number when compared to the passing of time. I don't know why either. Shin Yu sighed. Yu Qiancho and Sungin Aksayan glanced at each other. There was some suspicion in their eyes. They felt that this river clam was either bragging and hadn't lived for that long, or it didn't want to talk about it. Sungin Aksayan gave him a look, as if to ask him to continue. Maybe he could get something out of it. Yu Qiancho rolled his eyes, as if saying, "I'm your enemy, why should I listen to you?" Sungin Aksayan was speechless. In fact, Yu Qiancho had other thoughts in his mind. This Jiu Yu's life is in my hands. If he really has a secret that he can't keep to himself, then it must be a big secret. I'm the only one who knows about it. Why should I let Grey Cloud Faith know about it? Both sides of the Netherworld River were gloomy. From time to time, specks of flowing light would dance in the air. Serpent carried the two of them and rode the waves without slowing down. The rolling waves of the Netherworld River retreated quickly like smoke. However, the waves in front of them came again, and they could not see the end of the waves. It was unknown when Sungin Aksayan had also sat down. He sat back to back with Yu Qiancho. The two of them were silent as they sensed the heroic and vicissitudes of the Netherworld River. Looking at both sides of the river, there were sometimes plains, sometimes mountains, and sometimes gloomy valleys. Although they could not see clearly, the feeling of vastness made their hearts tremble. This feeling was indescribable. Yu Qiancho, a newbie who had just arrived in the Netherworld, didn't think much of it. He felt that the Netherworld should be like this. On the other hand, Sungin Aksayan, who had been to the Netherworld several times, sighed with emotion. He did not expect to see the Netherworld in a completely different way when he traveled quickly on this ancient Netherworld River. It was as if only the Netherworld River understood the Netherworld the best. This was because every section of the winding river was created by it. It was washed and settled by the endless years. It was an ancient and gloomy beauty of vicissitudes. Perhaps darkness was the most primitive beauty. The Netherworld River was sometimes wide and sometimes narrow. However, the widest part was still a few hundred meters wide. Yu Qiancho, who was looking at the scenery with his elbows on his knees and his palms supporting his chin, suddenly asked, "Serpent, how wide is the widest part of the Netherworld River?" "I've tried to cross the widest part once before. However, I walked and stopped from time to time and often changed directions." "It took me a few years," Serpent replied seriously. "I'm afraid that with my current speed, I'll need to swim for more than a month to get from the other side to this side." I'm not sure how wide it is exactly. So wide. Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyan Axian exclaimed at the same time. Obviously, it was Tsangyan Axian's first time hearing about it. The two of them suspected that Serpent was born to boast. He said that he had lived for more than 1,000,000 years, and now he said that he had created such a wide river. Was this really a river? It was more like a sea. Yu Qianqiu licked his lips and chuckled. I say, Serpent, you might have misunderstood me. You've mistaken the length of the Netherworld River for its width. I'm talking about the distance between us now. Ha! Great deity, you might think that I'm old and confused, but I'm not so old that I can't tell the difference between length and width. Speaking of the length of the Netherworld River, it's not something we can reach in a month with our current speed. Serpent sighed. Take the direction we're going now. If everything goes smoothly, it will take half a month to reach Twilight City. Then, we'll have to walk for another month before we can reach the Endless Horizon, and this is under the condition that everything goes smoothly. Endless Horizon. Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked Tsangyan Axian, do you know that place? Tsangyan Axian also turned around and nodded. I've heard of that place, but I've never been there. It seems that the people from the Netherworld that I've come into contact with are quite afraid of that place, and no one is willing to talk about it too much. That place is known as the punishment land of the Netherworld, so of course they're afraid. Serpent laughed and continued. Speaking of the endless horizon, you should be able to imagine that the distance that the Netherworld River traverses through is already incredibly long when you hear the word endless. After passing through the endless horizon, it's the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. I'm afraid no one knows how long the Netherworld River is there. Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyan Axian immediately gasped when they saw something specific for comparison. They finally understood how long the Netherworld River was. Its length was a concept that was very, very long, as if it was very far away, but no one could tell exactly how long it was. This was the length of the Netherworld River. While Tsangyan Axian was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu was already distracted. This was because Serpent mentioned the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. Rumor had it that Bai Changchun escaped to that place when he was being chased by the Emperor of the Netherworld. In this way, there was no need to go to Twilight City to inquire about the information. According to Serpent, they could just follow the Netherworld River and cross the endless horizon to reach there. But then again, since it was along the way, there was no harm in going to Twilight City to take a look. If the World Commerce Chamber really grew stronger one day, they would inevitably have to deal with that place. It was a good thing for him to explore the situation first, but that endless horizon, Serpent, what do you mean when you say that the endless horizon is the land of punishment in the Netherworld? Yu Qianqiu smiled. Also, you said that they are naturally afraid, but from what you said, you don't seem to be afraid at all. Ha! Serpent explained with a smile, the Netherworld is not as stable as the immortal world. You must have heard of the degree of chaos here. Many restless people who offend the Netherworld Royal Palace will be captured and sent to the Endless Horizon for punishment. Their dantian will be sealed so that they can't self-destruct or use their cultivation. They will be forced to do all kinds of hard labor day and night until they die of exhaustion. This kind of punishment is quite cruel to criminals. Many criminals can't stand this endless torture and commit suicide. However, this is the Netherworld. Even if you commit suicide, there are ways to imprison your primordial spirit and soul, reforge your body, and let you be reborn with your memory. You will continue to suffer until you die of exhaustion. This is called living a life worse than death. Begging for life, begging for death. The endless horizon also has another meaning, which is endless torture. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Axian were silent. They didn't think that the so-called endless horizon was such a den of demons. They had never heard of such a way of punishment. The two of them could imagine the misery and suffering that the prisoners who were imprisoned there had to go through. Just imagine, even the right to die was taken away. Such a cruel punishment made the two of them shudder and their scalps go numb just thinking about it. As for why I'm not afraid of the endless horizon, it's because the Netherworld Royal Palace has no right to punish us. The Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace have an agreement that we will not invade each other. If the people of the land invade us, we will report to the Netherworld Royal Palace and ask them to give us an explanation. Similarly, if we invade the people of the land, they will also report to us and we will also have to give them an explanation. I've heard of this. Greycloud Axion interrupted. That's why I found it strange that the Netherworld Royal Palace would attack us. We didn't offend you. You are from the immortal realm. Naturally, you are not included in the agreement between the Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace. Zhou Yu said weakly, his voice much softer. Greycloud Axion and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look at each other. This reason was simple and sufficient. Who asked them to not be from the Netherworld Royal Palace? Ha! Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked at Greycloud Axion. Isn't the Netherworld Emperor in charge of the entire Netherworld? Why is there an exception for the Netherworld Royal Palace? Greycloud Axion shook his head and said, I don't know. In any case, I heard that if the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace touch the Netherworld Royal Palace for no reason, they will be severely punished. Even most of the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace don't know why. But... As he said this, he lifted his heel and knocked on the shell. Since you have lived for so many years, you must have more experience than the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace. Moreover, you are one of the Netherworld Royal Palace's people. I'm sure you can answer our questions. Hee hee. Zhou Yu laughed proudly. This reason shouldn't be hard to guess. Since it is not under the Netherworld Emperor's control, it is naturally because he can't control it. Hearing this, the two looked at each other again. This reason was indeed simple, but it was also reasonable. It was just that people had thought too much about it and had confused themselves. But once they faced the truth, they realized that it was not a trivial matter. Yu Qianqiu said suspiciously, could it be that there is an expert in the Netherworld Royal Palace that even the Netherworld Emperor fears? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.